The words sliced through the parlor like a whip crack. Every eye in the room locked on Holden Mercer as he stood beside Tess Whitaker. Not the beautiful, delicate Lila everyone expected, but her older sister. The one with calloused hands and dirt under her fingernails. The one nobody ever looked at twice. Tess's father's face turned purple with rage. Lila's practiced smile shattered. And Tess? She stood frozen, waiting for Holden to take it back, to laugh, to reveal the cruel joke. But he didn't. The winter wind cut across the Montana territory like a dull blade, slow and mean. Tess Whitaker felt it through the worn fabric of her work coat as she hauled another armload of firewood toward the house. Her fingers had gone numb long ago, but she had learned to ignore that particular discomfort years back. There were always more important things than her own comfort, like keeping the stoves lit before her father's guests arrived. Through the kitchen window, she could see them preparing. Her younger sister Lila stood in the parlor like a porcelain doll, turning slowly while their mother adjusted the emerald dress that probably cost more than Tess earned in 6 months of ranch work. Not that Tess earned anything, she just worked. That was the arrangement nobody bothered explaining, because everyone understood it without words. "Tess!" Her father's voice carried from the house, sharp and impatient. "Where's that firewood?" She didn't answer, answering wasted breath she needed for carrying. She kicked open the kitchen door and dropped the load beside the cast-iron stove, bark and splinters scattering across the floor she had scrubbed that morning. Her mother appeared in the doorway, lips pressed thin. "Clean that up, and for heaven's sake, use the back entrance. Mr. Mercer will be here within the hour." "Mr. Mercer has seen worse than wood chips, Mama." "Not in this house, he hasn't." Her mother's eyes traveled over Tess's appearance with barely concealed disappointment. "Go upstairs and make yourself presentable. Lila can't be the only daughter visible tonight." Tess almost laughed. Presentable. As if there were any dress in this house that could transform her into something worth looking at. She had tried that game once, years ago, before she understood how it worked. Before she learned that some daughters were meant to be displayed, and others were meant to make sure the display didn't fall apart. "I'll wash up," Tess said, "but I'm not changing. If Mr. Mercer wants to see the Whitaker family, he should see all of it, even the parts we keep in the barn." Her mother's face hardened. "Your father knows exactly what I do around here." Tess moved past her toward the stairs. "He just prefers everyone else doesn't." The hot water in the basin upstairs was a luxury someone had prepared for Lila. Tess used what was left, scrubbing the dirt from under her fingernails with a brush that had seen better days. Her face in the mirror looked weathered from years of hard work, brown hair pulled back in a braid that had started neat at dawn and given up by noon. Skin tanned from work that wasn't supposed to mark a lady. Gray eyes that held no illusions about what tonight meant. Holden Mercer was coming to choose a bride. Everyone knew it. The arrangement had been negotiated in careful letters between her father and Vance Mercer over the past several months. The Whitaker Ranch was dying. Slowly, painfully, but definitely dying. Debts piled up like winter snow. Cattle prices had dropped. The water rights dispute with the Grangers was bleeding them dry in legal fees they couldn't afford. The Mercer Ranch, on the other hand, was an empire. Thousands of acres, profitable herds, political connections that reached all the way to the territorial governor. But even empires needed alliances, and apparently Vance Mercer had decided a marriage would seal this particular deal better than a handshake. So Holden was coming to inspect the merchandise. Tess pulled on her only clean shirt, plain blue cotton, serviceable, and her work pants. Her mother would hate it. Her father would probably send her back upstairs. But she was tired of pretending she was something she wasn't. If she had to stand in that parlor and watch her sister get chosen like a prize heifer, she would at least do it honestly. The voices downstairs had changed, deeper now, male. Tess descended the stairs slowly, each step careful and deliberate. Not because she was nervous. She had stopped getting nervous about these things, but because she wanted to see him before he saw her. Holden Mercer stood in the center of the parlor, like he owned it. Tall, maybe 6'1" or 2", with the kind of build that came from actual work rather than gymnasium exercises. Dark hair, strong jaw, eyes that didn't match his polite smile. He wore a suit, but it looked uncomfortable on him, like something he had put on for the occasion and would shed the moment he got home. Beside him stood his father, Vance Mercer, older, harder, with eyes that calculated the value of everything they touched. And beside the senior Mercer stood Tess's father, Silas Whitaker, wearing his best coat and his best performance of a man who hadn't mortgaged everything, including his daughters. "Ah, Lila," Silas's voice dripped with pride. "Come meet Mr. Holden Mercer." Lila glided forward, and Tess had to admit her sister had mastered the art. Every movement measured, graceful, designed to catch light and attention. The emerald dress whispered against the floor. Her blonde hair caught the lamplight. Her smile was warm, but not eager, interested, but not desperate. "Mr. Mercer," Lila extended her hand. "It's a pleasure." Holden took her hand and bowed slightly over it. "Miss Whitaker, Your father has spoken very highly of you." "I hope not too highly," Lila said with a practiced laugh. "I'd hate to disappoint." Tess watched from the stairs, forgotten. This was the transaction. This was how it worked. Lila would charm, her father would negotiate, and eventually the Mercer men would leave with an agreement that would save the Whitaker ranch in exchange for one beautiful daughter. Then Holden's eyes lifted and found Tess standing there on the stairs in her work clothes and worn boots. Something shifted in his expression, not attraction. Tess wasn't fool enough to mistake it for that. More like recognition, the way you might spot something unexpected in a familiar landscape. "And this is?" Holden's question hung in the air. Her father turned, saw Tess, and his jaw tightened. "My older daughter, Tess, she was just bringing in firewood." Tess finished, descending the last few steps. Someone had to make sure everyone stayed warm. An uncomfortable silence spread through the parlor. Her mother looked mortified. Lila's smile stayed fixed, but her eyes went cold. Vance Mercer's expression suggested he had found a rat in his dinner. But Holden Mercer was still looking at Tess with that strange, searching expression. "Firewood," he repeated. "In this weather, I imagine that's not easy work." "It's work," Tess said, "same as any other." "Tess helps around the property," her father said quickly, damage control spinning into motion. "She's very capable, but please, Mr. Mercer, let's sit. We have much to discuss." The evening proceeded according to script. Lila sat beside Holden on the settee, answering questions about her education. Excellent. Her musical abilities. Accomplished. Her interests. Appropriately cultured. She was perfect. Tess could have recited the performance from memory. Vance Mercer directed most of the conversation, steering it toward business arrangements while maintaining the fiction that this was purely social. Silas Whitaker agreed with everything, laughed at every joke, and slowly sold his daughter with the desperate charm of a man watching his entire world collapse. Tess served coffee, poured drinks, remained invisible except when usefulness demanded otherwise. But every time she moved through the room, she felt Holden Mercer watching her. Not the way men usually watched when they wanted something. More like he was trying to figure out a puzzle that didn't quite fit the pattern he expected. As the evening wore on, Vance Mercer stood. "Well, Silas, I believe we've had a productive evening. Holden, we should head back. Early morning tomorrow." Of course. Holden rose, but his attention stayed on Tess as she collected empty cups. "Miss Tess, do you ride?" The question came out of nowhere. Everyone in the parlor froze. Yes," Tess said. Someone has to check the fence lines. The north pastures are beautiful this time of year, even in winter, Holden said. Perhaps you could show me the property tomorrow, if your father permits. Silas Whitaker's smile looked painful. I'm sure Lila would be delighted to. I'd like Miss Tess to show me, Holden interrupted, polite but firm. If she's the one checking fence lines, she knows the land better than anyone. Vance Mercer's expression darkened. Holden, we discussed a tour of the property, Holden finished, and Miss Tess clearly works the property. Makes sense she'd give the tour. Tess's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't how it worked. This wasn't the script. She glanced at Lila, who sat frozen with that perfect smile, cracking at the edges. Of course, Silas Whitaker said, though his voice had gone tight. Tess would be honored. Shall we say mid-morning? Mid-morning is fine. Holden nodded to the room. Ladies, Silas, until tomorrow. The Mercer men left, and the moment the door closed, the parlor exploded. What the hell was that? Silas Whitaker's face had gone crimson. He's supposed to be courting Lila. He was just being polite, Tess's mother said quickly. Asking about the property, nothing more. He looked at her, Lila said quietly. And for the first time, Tess heard something genuine in her sister's voice, something hurt and confused. The whole evening he kept looking at her, because she looked like a field hand in my parlor. Silas turned on Tess. What were you thinking coming down, dressed like that? You told me to be presentable, Tess said. This is what presentable looks like on me. Don't be smart with me. That man is our only chance to save this ranch, and you... I didn't do anything, Tess said, exhausted suddenly. I brought in firewood. I served coffee. I stayed out of the way, just like always. Then why did he ask for you? Her father's voice dropped to something dangerous. What did you do? Nothing. I don't know. And that was true. Tess had no idea why Holden Mercer had singled her out. It didn't make sense. Men like him didn't notice women like her. That was how the world worked. Well, you'll fix it tomorrow, Silas said. You'll take him on this damn tour. You'll talk up Lila the entire time, and you'll make it clear where his attention should be. Understood? Tess nodded. There was no point arguing. That night, lying in her narrow bed, listening to the wind rattle her window, Tess tried to make sense of it. Maybe Holden Mercer was just being kind. Maybe he felt sorry for the rough-handed older sister, clearly pushed aside for the prettier one. Maybe he genuinely wanted to see the property and didn't care who showed him. Or maybe, a small voice whispered, he saw something the others didn't. Tess crushed that thought immediately. That kind of hope was dangerous. She had learned that years ago. Morning came cold and clear. Tess was up before dawn, same as always, tending to the horses and checking the animals. By the time Holden Mercer arrived mid-morning, she had already put in half a day's work. He came alone. That surprised her. No father watching over his shoulder, no chaperone insisting on propriety. Just Holden Mercer on a big gray horse, dressed in practical riding clothes that looked far more comfortable than last night's suit. "Miss Tess?" He tipped his hat. "Mr. Mercer." She had saddled her own horse, a bay mare named Rosie, who had seen better days, but still had good instincts. "The property's not much to see this time of year, but I'll show you what we have." They rode in silence for the first while, following the fence line toward the north pastures. Tess pointed out boundaries, water sources, sections that needed repair. She spoke plainly, without embellishment, the way she talked to one of the ranch hands. Holden listened without interrupting. Finally, as they crested a small hill overlooking the valley, he spoke. "You do all this yourself, not all of it. We have 2 hands who help, but most of it, yes, your father is busy managing finances and legal matters," Tess said, repeating the script she had been taught. "And Lila handles the household and social obligations, and you handle everything else." It wasn't a question, but Tess answered anyway. "Someone has to." Holden dismounted near a section of fence that sagged badly, running his hand along the worn wood. "This needs replacing, I know, along with about 40 other sections. We don't have the lumber. The water rights dispute with the Grangers. How bad is it?" Tess hesitated. This wasn't proper conversation. She wasn't supposed to know about these things, much less discuss them with a potential business partner. But lying seemed pointless. He would find out eventually if this alliance happened. "Bad," she said. "We've been sharing creek access for 2 decades, but several years ago they tried to cut us off completely, said the original agreement was invalid. It's been in court ever since, bleeding us dry. Who's in the right, legally? Probably us. Practically, doesn't matter. We can't afford to keep fighting, and they know it." Holden was quiet for a long moment, studying the fence, the land, the distant mountains. "Your father seems to think a marriage alliance with my family will solve his problems." Tess's hands tightened on the reins. "My father thinks a lot of things." "And what do you think?" The question caught her off guard. Nobody asked what she thought about anything. "I think," Tess said carefully, "that alliances only work if both sides honor them. And I think marriage is a hell of a thing to stake a ranch on." Holden turned to look at her fully. "You don't approve of this arrangement. Doesn't matter if I approve. It's not my arrangement, but it's your sister. Lila knows what she's getting into. She's been prepared for this kind of match her whole life." Tess kept her voice neutral. "She'll make you a good wife, Mr. Mercer. She's beautiful, educated, cultured, Everything a man in your position should want. And what if that's not what I want? Tess's heart stuttered. She told herself she had misheard, misunderstood. I don't follow. Holden mounted his horse again, but he didn't move to ride. Last night, when I looked around your parlor, you want to know what I saw? I saw a stage, everyone playing their parts perfectly. Your father, the desperate landowner. My father, the calculating empire builder. Your sister, the perfect bride. Even my own role, the dutiful son making an advantageous match. That's how these things work, Tess said. I know. I've been to a dozen of these arrangements, met a dozen perfect daughters in a dozen beautiful parlors, and every single one felt exactly the same. Empty. Performed. He looked at her. Then you came down those stairs in work clothes, with dirt under your fingernails, and for the first time in months, I saw something real. Tess couldn't breathe properly. This was wrong. This was dangerous. Mr. Mercer, you should know that my father instructed me to spend today talking up my sister's virtues, making sure you understood where your attention should be focused. Did he now? Yes, so let me be clear. Lila is kind, intelligent, and accomplished. She plays piano beautifully. She speaks French. She'll host dinners and manage your household and never embarrass you in front of important people. She's everything I'm not. And what are you? The question hung between them like smoke. I'm the daughter who makes sure the firewood gets brought in, Tess said finally. That's all. I don't believe that. Believe what you want, Mr. Mercer. But I know how this story goes. You'll marry Lila. The alliance will save my father's ranch, and everyone gets what they need. That's the arrangement. What if I want a different arrangement? Then you're a fool, Tess said bluntly. Lila is the prize here. I'm just the help. Holden studied her for a long moment, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Then he smiled, not the polite social smile from last night, but something genuine and slightly reckless. You know what my father told me before we left last night. He said, "Choose the pretty one. She'll photograph well and won't embarrass us at social functions." That's what he thinks marriage is for. Display and contracts. He's not wrong, Tess said. Not in your world. Maybe I'm tired of my world. They rode back slowly, the sun climbing toward noon. Tess's mind raced, trying to figure out what game Holden Mercer was playing. Men in his position didn't choose the rough-handed older sister. They just didn't. It violated every social rule, every practical consideration, every lesson Tess had learned about her place in the world, unless he was toying with her. The thought arrived cold and sharp. Maybe this was some kind of test. Maybe he wanted to see if she'd overstep, get ideas above her station, embarrass herself by imagining she could compete with Leela. Well, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction. When they reached the barn, Tess dismounted quickly. "Thank you for the tour, Mr. Mercer. I'm sure my father will be eager to hear your thoughts. Tess, I have work to finish." She led Rosie into the barn without looking back. But that evening, when the Mercer men returned for dinner, everything went wrong. The meal was elaborate. Silas Whittaker had spent money they didn't have to impress. Lila wore a different dress, even more stunning than the night before. The table glittered with their best silver, polished until it hurt to look at. Tess had been instructed to eat in the kitchen. She was halfway through a cold plate when her father appeared in the doorway, face pale. "Tess, parlor, now." Her stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "Just come." The parlor felt airless when she entered. Her mother sat rigid on the settee. Lila stood by the window, her back to the room. Vance Mercer looked like he had swallowed something poisonous, and Holden Mercer stood in the center of it all, chin raised, shoulders squared. "Tell her," Silas Whittaker said, voice strangled. Holden turned to Tess. "I've informed both our fathers that if this alliance is to proceed, you're the daughter I intend to marry, not Lila. You." The floor dropped out from under Tess's world. "No," she heard herself say. "No, that's not. You can't. You're choosing her." Silas Whittaker's voice climbed toward hysteria. "The stable girl over my daughter? I'm choosing the woman who actually runs this ranch," Holden said calmly. "The woman who knows every fence line, every water source, every problem you've been hiding behind pretty dresses and dinner parties. I need a partner, Mr. Whittaker, not a decoration." "This is insane," Vance Mercer said. "Holden, we discussed." "You discussed," Holden interrupted. "I'm deciding." Lila finally turned from the window. Her face was composed, but Tess could see the devastation underneath. "It's fine," Lila said quietly, "if that's what Mr. Mercer wants." "It's not fine." Silas Whittaker's face had gone purple. "Tess is completely unsuitable. She has no social graces, no education, no... She has more practical knowledge than half the ranchers in this territory," Holden said. "Including you, sir, if you'll pardon my saying so." The insult hung in the air like gun smoke. Silas Whittaker looked at Tess with something between rage and desperation. "Refuse him." "What? Refuse him? Tell him you won't marry him. Tell him the arrangement is for Lila, as it should be." Tess's mind reeled. This was madness. Holden Mercer was offering her an escape from this house, from invisibility, from a future of endless work and no acknowledgement. And her father wanted her to refuse it, so Lila could have what Lila was supposed to have. The old Tess would have done it. The Tess who believed she existed only to make sure everyone else got what they needed. But something had broken inside her today. When Holden Mercer looked at her on that hill and asked what she thought, when he saw value in the parts of her everyone else treated as worthless. No, Tess heard herself say. "What did you say?" I said no. Her voice grew stronger. "If Mr. Mercer wants to marry me, I accept." Her father's face went white. "Tess, I'm warning you. Warn all you want." Years of silence cracked open. "You've treated me like hired help my entire life, worked me like a ranch hand, fed me kitchen scraps, kept me invisible so Lila could shine. And now you want me to refuse the one man who's ever seen me as more than a pair of hands. No, I'm done making myself small for your comfort." "You ungrateful!" Silas's voice rose. Tess's mother's voice cut through, quiet but firm. "Stop." Everyone turned to stare at her. Tess's mother stood slowly, her face unreadable. "She's right. We've used her shamefully. I've used her shamefully." She looked at Tess with something that might have been regret. "If Mr. Mercer sees value in you, perhaps we should have seen it too. Eleanor, you can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious." She turned to Holden. "If my daughter accepts your proposal, she goes with my blessing. Such as that's worth." Lila made a small sound, quickly stifled. Vance Mercer stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Holden, we're leaving now." "I'm staying," Holden said, "to finalize arrangements." "You're throwing away a perfectly good alliance for a—" Vance caught himself. "A woman who can actually help me build something," Holden finished. "Yes, Father, I am." Vance Mercer stared at his son with cold fury. Then he grabbed his coat and hat. "Fine. Ruin yourself, but don't expect me to clean up the mess." He slammed out of the house. The silence he left behind felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. Silas Whitaker looked at Tess with something she had never seen before. Not love, not respect, but a kind of bitter recognition that she had finally become someone he couldn't control. "Get out," he said quietly. "Both of you, get out of my house." "Silas," Tess's mother started. "I said get out." He was shaking. "If she wants to humiliate this family, she can do it elsewhere." Holden moved to Tess's side. "Can you be ready to leave in a few minutes?" Tess thought about her room upstairs. The narrow bed, the worn clothes, the few possessions she had accumulated in years of making herself useful. None of it felt worth keeping. "I'm ready now," she said. They walked out together into the winter night. The cold bit through Tess's shirt, but she barely felt it. Behind her she heard Lila crying softly, and her mother's voice trying to comfort. Her father's rage followed them all the way to the barn. Holden saddled both horses while Tess stood there, numb and shaking. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "Any of it." "Yes, I did." You checked the cinch on his saddle. "I'm tired of building my life according to my father's blueprints. And I'm tired of watching strong women get treated like furniture. You don't even know me." "I know enough." He turned to her. "I know you keep an entire ranch running with 2 hands and no recognition. I know you tell the truth even when lying would be easier. I know you're strong enough to survive out here, and that's more than I can say for most people." He paused. "But if you want to stay, there's nothing for me here," Tess said. "There never was." They mounted and rode into darkness, leaving the Whitaker Ranch behind. Tess didn't look back. If she had, she might have seen her mother standing in the doorway, watching her daughter disappear. She might have seen Lila at the window, one hand pressed to the glass. She might have seen her father in the parlor, staring at the empty space where his useful daughter used to stand. But Tess kept her eyes forward, riding toward something she couldn't name, something terrifying and possible, and entirely her own choice. The Mercer Ranch appeared on the horizon just after midnight, a sprawling collection of buildings lit against the darkness like a city. Tess had heard about the scale of the operation, but seeing it stole her breath. This wasn't a ranch. This was an empire. Holden led her past the main barns toward a house that looked more like a mansion. Lights glowed in several windows despite the late hour. "My father will be waiting," Holden said. "Fair warning, he won't make this easy." "I didn't expect easy." They tied the horses and climbed the steps to a wide porch. Before Holden could open the door, it swung inward. Vance Mercer stood there, scotch in hand, eyes cold. "So you actually brought her?" "I did," Holden said. Vance looked Tess up and down, like she was livestock at auction. "You realize this is suicide for the Alliance. Silas Whitaker won't honor any agreement now. You've humiliated his favored daughter and stolen the wrong one." "I didn't steal anyone," Holden said. "Tess made her own choice." "Did she now?" Vance stepped aside to let them in. "Well then, Miss Tess, welcome to the Mercer Ranch. I do hope you understand what you've gotten yourself into." The interior of the house was overwhelming. High ceilings, expensive furniture, walls covered in paintings and trophies, everything designed to remind you exactly how much power the Mercer family held. Tess had never felt smaller in her life. "Rosa will show you to a room," Vance said, gesturing to an older Mexican woman who had appeared from somewhere. "We'll discuss arrangements in the morning, assuming you both come to your senses by then." Tess followed Rosa up a grand staircase and down a hallway lined with closed doors. The room Rosa opened was bigger than Tess's entire bedroom back home, with a 4-poster bed and curtains that probably cost more than a good horse. "Bathroom is through there," Rosa said, pointing. "If you need anything, pull that cord. Someone will come." "Thank you," Tess managed. Rosa started to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, miss, I think the young Mr. Mercer made a good choice. We could use someone real around here." Then she was gone, and Tess was alone in a room designed for someone who belonged. She sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her work clothes, still smelling of horses and cold night air. Around her, the mansion settled into silence, expensive, suffocating silence. What had she done? Hours ago, she had been invisible, miserable, but at least familiar with her misery. Now she was engaged to a man she barely knew, living in a house that felt like a museum, facing a future that made no sense according to any rules she understood. But when she closed her eyes, she remembered standing on that hill with Holden Mercer, speaking truthfully for the first time in years, being seen for the first time in her life. Maybe that was worth the terror. Tess lay back on the impossibly soft bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the foreign sounds of her new prison, or her new freedom. She wouldn't know which until morning. Dawn came too early and too bright. Tess woke disoriented, tangled in sheets that felt like silk against her work-roughened skin. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it all crashed back. The choice, the fight, the midnight ride. Vance Mercer's cold eyes measuring her worth and finding her lacking. She sat up, muscles stiff from yesterday's tension. Through the window she could see the Mercer ranch spreading out in every direction, bigger in daylight than it had seemed in darkness. Barns, corrals, outbuildings, workers already moving between them like ants in a well-organized colony. This was what Holden stood to inherit. This was what his father thought she'd ruin. Someone knocked on the door. "Come in," Tess called, expecting Rosa. Instead, Holden entered, already dressed for work in worn jeans and a flannel shirt that looked like he had owned it for years. He carried a cup of coffee that smelled strong enough to wake the dead. "Thought you might need this." He set it on the bedside table. "How'd you sleep?" "Like someone who just burned down her entire life." Tess reached for the coffee. "Your father hate me yet?" "He hated you before you got here. Now he's just deciding how to get rid of you." Holden sat in the chair by the window, casual as if visiting women's bedrooms at dawn was perfectly normal. "He's called a family meeting for mid-morning. That gives us some time." "For what?" "For me to show you what you're actually getting into." He stood. Get dressed. Wear something you can work in. Tess almost laughed. That's all I own. A short while later, they were walking through the main barn, boots crunching on fresh straw. The scale of the operation made Tess's old ranch look like a child's plaything. Dozens of horses in clean stalls, tack organized with military precision. Ranch hands moving with the efficiency of people who knew exactly what was expected. A few of them nodded to Holden. Most of them stared at Tess like she was a curiosity that had wandered in from somewhere else. We run about 2,000 head of cattle across 4 ranges, Holden was saying. Employ 32 full-time hands, another 20 seasonal during roundup. My father built this from nothing over 30 years. He's proud of it, won't let anyone forget it, including you, especially me. Holden led her toward a corral where several men were working with young horses. He expects me to expand it, double the herd, acquire more land, push into markets back east, build an empire worthy of the Mercer name. And you don't want that? Holden was quiet for a moment, watching a sorrel colt buck against a training rope. I want to build something that lasts. That's not the same thing as building something big. One of the ranch hands approached, older, weathered, with the kind of face that had seen everything twice. Boss, we got a problem with the fence line up on the North Ridge. Whole section came down in the wind last night. How many posts? Maybe 20. Could have been worse, but we'll need lumber. I'll ride up after the meeting. Holden turned to Tess. This is Hank Lowry, our foreman. Hank, this is Tess Whitaker. She'll be working with us. Hank's eyebrows climbed toward his hat. Working with us, or working, Tess said firmly. What kind of fence are we talking about? Hank glanced at Holden, uncertain, then back at Tess. Split rail mostly. Keeps the cattle from drifting into Granger property. The Grangers who are fighting my father over water rights. The same. Hank's expression shifted, reassessing. You know about that. I know my father's been bleeding money on lawyers while the Grangers cut off creek access. I know it's going to bankrupt him inside 6 months. Tess looked at Holden. I'm guessing your father thought a marriage alliance would solve that problem. Tie the properties together. Make the dispute irrelevant. That was the idea, Holden said. Except I'm not Lila, and my father probably wants me dead right now. Which means that alliance is toast. Tess turned back to Hank. So, when that fence comes down and cattle drift onto Granger land, we've got a different problem entirely. Hank's face split into something like a grin. I'll be damned. She actually knows ranching. She actually does. Holden said, which is why when my father tries to tear her apart at breakfast, I'd appreciate the men remembering who fixes fence lines around here. Hank nodded slowly. Word travels fast in a bunkhouse. I'll make sure it travels in the right direction. They continued walking, Holden pointing out various buildings and operations, while Tess memorized everything. She had always been good at this, absorbing information, understanding systems, seeing how pieces fit together. Her father had never valued the skill. Maybe here it would matter. The house loomed ahead, grand and intimidating in morning light. Tess's stomach tightened. "Your father's going to want me gone," she said. "Probably. And you're going to fight him on it." "Definitely." Tess stopped walking. "Why, you barely know me. For all you know, I'm terrible. I could be lazy, stupid, mean as a snake." "Are you?" "No, but that's not the point. You're risking your relationship with your father, your inheritance, your entire future on someone you met yesterday." Holden turned to face her fully. "You want to know what I saw yesterday? I saw a woman who works harder than most men, speaks truth when everyone else is lying, and has more practical knowledge in her little finger than my father's last 3 business partners combined. I saw someone real in a world that's merely performance." He paused. "And I saw someone brave enough to choose something terrifying over something safe. That's not nothing, Tess. It might not be enough. Then we'll find out together." The family meeting took place in a dining room that could seat 20. Currently, it seated 3. Vance Mercer at the head of the table, Holden to his right, Tess across from Holden, where she could face Vance directly. Rosa brought coffee and disappeared quickly, like she knew what was coming. Vance didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I'll make this simple. This marriage is not happening." "Yes, it is," Holden said calmly. "You're throwing away a strategic alliance with the Whitakers. Silas Whitaker's ranch is dying. We both know that. The only value in that alliance was combining properties to solve the Granger dispute. But there are other ways to handle the Grangers. By marrying the daughter nobody wanted." Vance looked at Tess. "No offense, Miss Whitaker, but you're not what we negotiated for." "None taken," Tess said. "I'm aware I wasn't the prize." "Then you understand this is impossible. You have no social connections, no education, no—" "She understands ranching," Holden interrupted, "which is more than I can say for most of the daughters you've paraded in front of me." Vance's eyes went cold. "We have investors coming in the coming days, important men from Chicago and St. Louis. They expect to see a Mercer family that looks like success, polished, sophisticated, powerful. How exactly do you plan to present her?" "As my wife," Holden said. "Same as I'd present anyone. They'll laugh at you, at us. We'll lose millions in potential investment because you wanted to make some romantic gesture toward a field hand." The words hit like a slap. Tess felt her face flush, but she kept her voice level. "Mr. Mercer, I understand I'm not what you wanted for your son, but I'm what he chose. So you've got 2 options. Find a way to work with that, or keep fighting us, and watch what it does to your relationship with him." Vance turned his full attention to her, and Tess understood suddenly why men feared this man. His gaze could cut steel. "You think you're brave," Vance said, standing up to me, making demands. "But bravery without intelligence is just stupidity. You have no idea what you've walked into." "Then educate me." "This ranch represents 30 years of work. Every acre, every building, every dollar was earned through calculation and strategy. I didn't build this by making emotional decisions or rewarding people for having rough hands." He leaned forward. "I built it by being smarter and harder than everyone around me. And I'm not about to let my son tear it down because he was charmed by some frontier girl playing at equality." "I'm not playing at anything," Tess said. "I've worked ranches my entire life. I know cattle, horses, land management, water rights, fence repair, herd rotation, none of which matters in a business meeting with investors who expect a certain presentation." Tess understood then. This wasn't about her skills. It was about her not looking like she belonged in their world. Not speaking like them, dressing like them, performing like them. "So hire someone polished for your investor meetings," Tess said. "I'll be out fixing the fence line on North Ridge, where I can actually be useful." Vance smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Oh, you'll be at those meetings, Ms. Whitaker. If you're going to ruin this family's reputation, you might as well do it publicly." The meeting ended badly. Vance left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Tess sat there feeling scraped raw. "That went well," she said. Holden actually laughed. "That was him being restrained. Trust me. Your father hates me. My father hates everyone who doesn't fit his master plan. You get used to it." "Do you?" Tess looked at him. "Get used to it?" Holden's smile faded. "No, but I've learned to survive it." The following days passed in a blur of work and warfare. Tess threw herself into ranch operations, determined to prove her value where it actually counted. She rode fence lines with Hank Lowry, helped repair equipment, worked with the hands during morning roundups. The men were skeptical at first, another boss's wife playing rancher, until they saw her actually work. Tess could rope, ride, and repair better than half of them. She didn't complain, didn't quit when things got hard, and didn't expect special treatment. By the 4th day, Hank was assigning her real work instead of make work. By the 7th, some of the hands were actually asking her opinion. Vance watched all of it with disapproval that bordered on contempt. He never missed an opportunity to undermine her. At dinner, he would discuss business matters while speaking over Tess as if she wasn't there. When she offered suggestions, he would dismiss them without consideration. He introduced her to visiting ranchers as Holden's project, leaving the implication hanging. Tess endured it because fighting him openly would only make things worse for Holden. But every slight built pressure inside her, like steam in a sealed pipe. Holden saw it. "You don't have to take this." "Yes, I do," Tess said. They were sitting on the porch after another brutal dinner, where Vance had spent an hour discussing investment strategies without once acknowledging Tess's presence. "If I fight him every time, it just proves his point that I'm difficult, unsuitable, a problem." "You're not a problem. I'm a problem he didn't plan for. That's the worst kind." Tess watched the sunset paint the mountains red. "He built this whole empire on control, controlling land, cattle, markets, people. And you brought home someone he can't control. Of course he hates me. He'll come around." Tess didn't believe that, but she didn't say so. Instead, she asked, "Tell me about your mother." Holden went quiet. Long enough that Tess thought he wouldn't answer. "She died when I was 15, he finally said. "Fever. It was fast. 3 days from healthy to gone." He paused. "My father was different before that. Harder after, like something broke in him that never healed." "Did she work the ranch?" "No, she was exactly what my father wanted. Polished, educated, connected to the right families. She knew how to host dinners and navigate society and make everyone feel important." Holden smiled sadly. "But she hated it. I found her journals after she died. Page after page about feeling like a decoration, a prop in someone else's show." "Did your father know?" "I don't think he cared. She served her purpose." Holden looked at Tess. "That's why I didn't want another polished daughter. I watched my mother suffocate slowly in that role. I won't do that to someone else." Tess understood then. This wasn't just about her. It was about Holden refusing to replicate his parents' marriage, refusing to become his father. "I'm sorry," she said. "About your mother." "Me too." That night, Tess couldn't sleep. She wandered downstairs around midnight, thinking she'd find the kitchen, maybe make tea. Instead, she found Vance Mercer sitting in his study, with a whiskey, staring at a portrait on the wall. The woman in the portrait was beautiful. Dark hair, kind eyes, elegant bearing. Catherine Mercer, presumably. "She would have hated you," Vance said, without looking away from the painting. Tess froze in the doorway. "Excuse me?" "My wife. She would have seen exactly what you are. A rough-handed nobody trying to climb above her station." He finally turned to look at Tess. She understood the importance of maintaining standards, of marrying appropriately. Did she? Tess heard herself say. Or did she just understand how to survive the expectations you put on her? Vance's eyes went dangerous. "You know nothing about my wife. I know she's dead, and you're still trying to control everything around you, like that'll bring her back." The words came out sharper than Tess intended, but she didn't take them back. "I know Holden is terrified of becoming like you, and I know whatever you're doing right now, drinking alone in the dark, talking to her portrait, isn't the behavior of someone who's won." For a moment, Tess thought Vance might actually hit her. He stood abruptly, fury radiating off him in waves. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Maybe not, but I know what it looks like when someone's afraid." Tess held her ground. "You're not angry because I'm unsuitable. You're angry because Holden made a choice you didn't control, and that terrifies you. Get out of my study." "It's not your study. It's just a room where you sit and pretend you're still in control of everything. Get out." Tess left. Her hands were shaking. That had been stupid, dangerous, possibly suicidal for any hope of peace in this house, but she was so tired of swallowing words, bending, making herself smaller. She made it halfway up the stairs before she heard glass shatter in the study. The next morning, news came that changed everything. Hank Lowry burst into the barn, where Tess was checking on a mare with an injured hoof. "We got trouble. Big trouble." "What kind?" "Cattle thieves hit the South Range last night. Took maybe 40 head. Tess's stomach dropped. 40 head was serious money. "Does Holden know?" "He's riding out now with 6 men. But there's more." Hank's face was grim. "Trail leads toward Granger property. If Holden crosses that boundary chasing stolen cattle, it'll start a war." Tess finished. The Grangers were already hostile over the water rights dispute. Armed Mercer men crossing onto their land would be all the excuse they needed for violence. "I need a horse," Tess said. "Miss Tess." "Now, Hank, fast one." She caught up to Holden's group a few miles out, pushing her horse hard across open range. Holden turned when he heard hoofbeats, his face darkening when he saw her. "Go back." "Not happening." Tess pulled up beside him. "Hank told me where the trail leads, which is why you should be back at the ranch. So you can ride into an ambush alone." "Smart." One of the other men, a young hand named Jeb, spoke up. "She's right, boss. Grangers have been looking for an excuse. This feels like bait." "I don't care if it's bait," Holden said. "They stole 40 head of our cattle. We're getting them back." "And if the Grangers are waiting with rifles," Tess demanded. "If they shoot you for trespassing, what then?" "Then we shoot back." Tess had never seen this side of Holden. Cold, determined, angry. This was the rancher, not the man who had chosen her on a hillside. This was someone who would fight for what was his, regardless of cost. "There's another way," she said. "What way?" Tess thought fast. "Let me ride ahead, alone. I'll approach the Granger Ranch, explain what happened, ask to parley. They'll laugh at you, maybe, but they won't shoot an unarmed woman riding in openly. If I can get them to talk, we might recover the cattle without bloodshed. Absolutely not, Holden said. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than 7 men with guns riding onto hostile property. They argued for another few minutes while the cattle trail grew colder. Finally, Jeb interrupted. "Boss, we're losing time. Either we go now, or we don't go at all." Holden looked at Tess, conflict written across his face. "If anything happens to you, then you'll have excellent grounds to start that war you're itching for," Tess said. "But let me try this first." She rode ahead before he could argue more, following the cattle trail toward the boundary between Mercer and Granger land. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had no authority, no backup, no real plan beyond hoping the Grangers valued talking over shooting. The Granger Ranch appeared over a rise, smaller than the Mercer place, but well maintained. Tess could see cattle in the distance. Some of them looked suspiciously like Mercer stock. She was 50 yards from the main house when 3 men rode out to meet her, rifles across their saddles. The one in front was older, graying, with eyes like flint. "That's far enough. State your business." "My name is Tess Whitaker. I'm here about the cattle stolen from Mercer land last night." "Don't know anything about stolen cattle." 40 head. Trail leads straight here." Tess kept her hands visible, her voice calm. "I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just asking for a conversation before this turns into something nobody wants." The man studied her. "You're the one Holden Mercer married instead of the pretty sister." Word traveled fast in ranching country. "That's me. Heard you got rough hands. Work the ranch yourself." "I do. Also heard Vance Mercer hates your guts." Tess almost smiled. "That's accurate, too." The man exchanged glances with the other 2. "I'm Levi Granger. This is my land you're on. Uninvited." "I know. I'm asking for an invitation to accuse us of theft, to prevent a war." Tess gestured behind her. "Holden Mercer is back there with 6 armed men ready to cross your boundary and take those cattle back by force. I convinced him to let me try talking first, so I'm talking. Are you listening?" Levi Granger was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Follow me, but your husband and his men stay where they are." Tess followed the Grangers to the ranch house, hyper-aware that she was gambling everything on the hope that these men preferred negotiation to violence. Inside, Levi's wife brought coffee while Tess explained the situation. Stolen cattle, the trail, Holden's men waiting at the boundary. "Those cattle were driven onto our land last night," Levi admitted, "but not by us. Found them mixed with our herd this morning. Mercer brand is clear as day." "Then who drove them here? Someone who wants Mercer and Granger shooting at each other." Levi's face was hard. "We've got our disputes, but I'm not a thief, and I'm not stupid. Starting a shooting war over 40 head makes no sense." Tess understood suddenly. Someone's trying to escalate the water dispute. That would be my guess. Make it personal. Make it violent, then swoop in and buy up whatever's left when we've destroyed each other. Who benefits? Could be anyone. Land speculators, rival ranchers, someone who wants both our properties cheap. Levi looked at her. "You seem smart for someone who just got here. Why are you really doing this?" "Because I'm tired of watching men solve problems with bullets when talking might work." Tess set down her coffee cup. "And because if Holden crosses that boundary with guns, someone dies. Maybe him, maybe you, maybe someone's son or father over cattle that were stolen to create exactly this situation." Levi studied her for a long time. "All right, here's what I'll do. I'll have my men separate those 40 head and drive them back to the boundary. But I want witnesses. Mercer men and Granger men together. All of us seeing that we're returning stolen property, not starting a fight. And the person who actually stole them. We find them together, share information, figure out who profits from us killing each other." He extended his hand. "Deal?" Tess shook it. "Deal." A couple of hours later, both groups of men stood at the boundary, while Granger's hands drove the stolen cattle back across. Holden kept his weapons holstered, but his jaw tight, clearly hating every moment of this restraint. Levi Granger rode up to him. "Your wife's got more sense than both of us combined. She probably just saved a dozen lives." "She tends to do that," Holden said, looking at Tess with something complicated in his eyes. "Water dispute still stands," Levi said, "but we can talk about that like civilized men instead of killing each other over it." Agreed. After the Grangers left, Holden turned to Tess. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen." "Probably both," Tess admitted. Her hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "But it worked this time." Holden dismounted, pulled her down from her horse, held her tight enough that she could feel his heart racing. "Don't ever do that again." "Can't promise that." "Tess, you married someone who fixes problems, Holden. That's who I am. I can't stop being that just because it scares you." He pulled back to look at her. "It doesn't scare me. It terrifies me. The thought of you riding into danger alone is the same thought I have every time you do it, Tess. So I guess we're even." They rode back to the ranch as the sun came toward noon. The men talked among themselves, rehashing the confrontation, speculating about who had actually stolen the cattle. Tess half listened, exhausted suddenly. But when they reached the main house, Vance Mercer was waiting on the porch. His face was unreadable as they all dismounted. Hank started to explain what had happened, but Vance held up a hand. "I already heard. One of the Granger hands rode ahead to tell me you'd negotiated a return." He looked at Tess. "Is that accurate?" "Yes, sir," Tess said. "And you did this without consulting me?" "There wasn't time to consult anyone. Holden was about to start a range war. I had it handled," Holden said. "You had a plan to get shot," Tess corrected. "I had a plan to not get shot. Mine worked better." Several of the ranch hands tried to hide smiles. Vance's expression didn't change. "Come with me, both of you." They followed him into his study, the same room where Tess had confronted him the night before. Vance poured himself a whiskey. Didn't offer them any. "Levi Granger just sent a rider," Vance said. "Wants to meet in the coming days to discuss the water dispute. Says he's open to negotiation now that cooler heads have prevailed." He looked at Tess. "He specifically requested you be present." Tess blinked. "Me? Apparently you impressed him. Made him think the Mercer family might actually have someone reasonable to talk to." Vance took a drink. "I still think you're completely unsuitable for this family. I think Holden made a terrible mistake choosing you over a proper alliance." "But," Tess said, "but you just prevented a war that would have cost me men, cattle, and probably any chance at resolving this water situation peacefully." Vance set down his glass. "So, while I don't like you, don't approve of you, and don't believe you belong here, I'm willing to tolerate your presence for now." It wasn't acceptance. It wasn't even close to warmth. But it was the first crack in Vance Mercer's absolute opposition. "Thank you," Tess said carefully. "Don't thank me. Just don't make me regret this." Vance turned to Holden. "The investor dinner is still happening in a few days. She'll need appropriate clothing and enough coaching to not embarrass us." "I can handle myself," Tess said. "We'll see." Vance dismissed them with a gesture. Outside the study, Holden let out a long breath. "That's the closest thing to approval you'll ever get from him. He still hates me, yes, but now he hates you slightly less." Holden smiled. Progress. The next few days were brutal. Tess spent mornings working the ranch and afternoons being tutored by Rosa on proper behavior for formal dinners. Which fork for which course, how to make polite conversation without mentioning anything controversial. The art of smiling while still saying nothing of substance. Tess hated every minute. "This is ridiculous," she said after the third lesson on proper posture. "I'm not going to transform into some society lady in a few days." "No one expects you to," Rosa said. "But Mr. Mercer expects you not to humiliate him. There's a difference." The night of the dinner arrived like an execution date. Tess stood in her room, staring at the dress Rosa had procured. Deep blue, elegantly cut, expensive enough to make Tess's stomach hurt. She had never worn anything like it. A knock on the door. Holden entered and stopped when he saw her. "You look terrified," he said. I am terrified. Your father's right. I'm going to embarrass everyone. Probably. Holden crossed the room and took her hands. But you're also going to be honest, intelligent, and more knowledgeable about actual ranching than anyone in that dining room. So when they ask you questions, answer them. Don't perform. Don't try to be Lila. Just be Tess. And if that's not good enough, then they're idiots, and we'll take their money anyway. The dining room had been transformed. Crystal glittered. Silver gleamed, everything positioned to impress. The investors arrived exactly on time. 3 men from Chicago, 2 from St. Louis, all dressed in expensive suits that screamed urban wealth. Vance made introductions. Gentlemen, my son Holden and his fiancée, Tess Whitaker. One of the Chicago men, Dean, smiled politely. Whitaker, any relation to the Whitakers with the ranch east of here? My father, Tess said. Lovely property. Heard he's having some difficulties with water rights. This was a test. Tess could feel it. Say the wrong thing. Reveal family weakness, confirm their suspicions that she was unsuitable. Every ranch in this territory has water disputes, Tess said. It's what happens when you're trying to build civilization in a place that doesn't want it. Dean laughed. Well said. Dinner proceeded through multiple courses, while Vance guided conversation toward business opportunities, expansion plans, profit projections. The investors asked intelligent questions. Vance provided confident answers. Holden supported his father's vision while subtly tempering some of the more aggressive projections. And Tess stayed quiet, playing the role she had been assigned, until one of the St. Louis investors, Quentin Webb, turned to her directly. Ms. Whitaker, what do you think of Mr. Mercer's plan to double the herd over the next 3 years? Every eye turned to Tess. This was it. The moment Vance had warned her about. The moment she could destroy everything. Tess looked at Vance, who stared back with cold warning. Then she looked at Holden, who nodded slightly. Tell the truth. I think it's dangerous, Tess said. The table went quiet. Dangerous how? Quentin asked. Doubling a herd requires doubling grazing land, water access, and winter feed capacity. This territory doesn't have unlimited resources. Push too hard, overgraze the range, and you destroy the land that makes the whole operation possible. Tess kept her voice calm, factual. My father made that mistake. He expanded too fast, borrowed too much, counted on cattle prices staying high. When they dropped, he couldn't adapt. Now he's losing everything. Vance's face had gone carefully blank. So you're suggesting we don't expand? Dean asked. I'm suggesting expansion needs to be strategic, sustainable, based on actual carrying capacity rather than optimistic projections. Tess looked at Vance. Ambition is good. Recklessness is fatal. And you base this on... Quentin leaned forward, genuinely interested, on watching my father destroy a ranch through greed disguised as vision, and on working land long enough to know what it can actually support. For a moment, Tess thought Vance would explode. His hands were white-knuckled on his whiskey glass. Then Dean started laughing. "She's got a point, Vance. We've seen plenty of operations collapse from overexpansion. The ones that last are the ones that grow carefully. Ms. Whitaker clearly understands ranching better than most men I've met," Quentin added, "which is refreshing. Usually these dinners are all bluster and optimism. Nice to hear some practical sense." The evening shifted after that. The investors asked Tess more questions about land management, cattle breeds, market timing. She answered honestly, drawing on years of experience her father had never valued. By the time dessert arrived, the investors were nodding approvingly, and Vance looked like he had swallowed glass. After the guests left, Vance cornered Tess in the hallway. "You undermined me. I told them the truth. You made me look reckless in front of men whose money I need." "You were being reckless," Tess said, "and they knew it. I just said what they were already thinking." "You don't know what they were thinking." "Yes, I do. They're businessmen. They've seen operations fail from overexpansion. They were testing your judgment." Tess held his gaze. "And if I'd sat there nodding along with an unsustainable plan, they would have lost confidence in this entire family." Holden appeared in the hallway. "She's right, Father. Quentin told me on his way out that Tess's honesty impressed them. They're moving forward with the investment." Vance looked between them, fury and reluctant respect warring in his expression. Finally, he said, "Don't ever embarrass me like that again." "I didn't embarrass you," Tess said. "I saved you." She walked away before he could respond, her heart pounding. That had been dangerous, maybe suicidal for her place here, but she was done swallowing truth to make powerful men comfortable. Later that night, she found Holden on the porch, staring out at the dark ranch. "You could have backed your father." "I could have, but you were right." He looked at her. "You saved that deal tonight." They would have gone along with his plan, then watched it fail and blamed him for it. Now they trust us to actually know what we're doing. Your father doesn't see it that way. My father doesn't like being wrong. He'll adjust. Holden pulled her close. "You were magnificent tonight. Terrifying, but magnificent." Tess leaned against him, exhausted. Behind them, the house loomed dark and massive. Somewhere inside, Vance Mercer was probably plotting how to get rid of her. But Tess had survived the test. She had spoken truth and lived through it. For tonight, that was enough. The morning after the investor dinner, Tess woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. No name on it, just expensive paper sealed with wax. She opened it carefully. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, achingly familiar. "Tess, I need to see you. Please don't tell Father. L." Tess's hands trembled, holding the letter. "Lila, here, somehow." She dressed quickly and went downstairs where Rosa was preparing breakfast in the kitchen. "Did someone arrive last night?" Tess asked. Rosa's face went carefully neutral. "A young woman came to the servants' entrance around midnight. Asked for you specifically. Mr. Vance doesn't know she's here." "Where is she?" "The guest cottage, the small one, by the east barn." Rosa handed Tess a basket. "Take her this. She looked half-starved." Tess found Lila sitting on the cottage steps, still wearing the same traveling dress she must have ridden in. Her hair, usually perfect, hung in tangled waves. Her face was pale, eyes red from crying. "Tess?" Lila stood when she saw her, then seemed uncertain what to do with her hands. "I didn't know where else to go." Tess set down the basket and waited. Whatever had brought Lila here, it was bad enough to drive her across hostile territory in the dark to beg help from the sister she had barely spoken to in years. "Father arranged a marriage," Lila said finally, "to Edgar Pemberton." Tess knew the name. Everyone in the territory did. Edgar Pemberton was 63 years old, owned a bank in Denver, and had buried 2 wives already. "When?" "Next month. He's already paid Father $20,000. Lila's voice cracked. "I'm being sold, Tess, just like cattle. Father didn't even ask me. Just told me a couple of days ago that I was engaged, and the wedding was scheduled, and I should be grateful because Pemberton's money would save the ranch." "What did you say?" "What could I say? I'm 23 with no skills, no money, no prospects. Father made it very clear that if I refused, I'd be thrown out with nothing." Lila looked at Tess with desperate eyes. "So I ran, stole a horse, and rode all night. I don't even know what I'm asking for. I couldn't marry him, Tess. I couldn't." Tess studied her sister. The beautiful, polished Lila, who had stood silently in that parlor while their father raged at Tess for accepting Holden's proposal. The sister who had been trained her whole life to be exactly what men like Edgar Pemberton wanted: decorative, obedient, silent. Part of Tess wanted to turn away, wanted to tell Lila that she had made her choice when she didn't defend Tess, didn't speak up, didn't question the system that treated daughters like bargaining chips. But a larger part remembered being young and trapped with no good options. Remembered the terror of facing a future you didn't choose and couldn't escape. "Come on," Tess said. "Let's get you inside." The cottage was small but clean. Tess got Lila settled with food and water while her sister explained the rest. How her father had been drinking more since Tess left, raging about betrayal and ungrateful daughters. How he had sought out Pemberton deliberately, knowing the man would pay well for a young, beautiful wife. How Lila had overheard him telling their mother that if Tess had ruined one alliance, Lila would fix it by making a better one. He called it a business opportunity, Lila said bitterly. Said I should be honored that a man of Pemberton's wealth wanted me. And Mother cried, begged him to reconsider, but she won't stand up to him. She never has. Lila picked at the bread in the basket. I used to think that made her weak. Now I just think she's trapped too. Tess sat across from her sister, seeing Lila clearly for maybe the first time. Not a rival or a favored daughter, or a symbol of everything Tess wasn't. Just a young woman who had been raised to be pretty and quiet, and was now discovering that pretty and quiet got you sold to old men with bank accounts. You can stay here, Tess said, for now, until we figure out what to do. Holden won't want me here. Vance Mercer certainly won't. They don't get a vote. Tess stood. I'll talk to them. You rest. You look like you haven't slept in days. Tess? Lila's voice was small. Why are you helping me? After everything. Tess thought about that. Because someone helped me when I had nowhere to go. Guess I'm returning the favor. She found Holden in the barn, working on a saddle repair that probably could have waited, but gave him somewhere to put his hands while thinking. Lila's here, Tess said, without preamble. Holden's hands stilled. Your sister Lila. She ran away. Father arranged a marriage to Edgar Pemberton, the banker. He's ancient. He's rich. That's all Father cares about. Tess leaned against a stall door. She's staying in the East Cottage. I told her she could stay until we figure something out. Does my father know? Not yet. I'm telling you first because it'll go better if we present it together. Holden set down the saddle. Tess, having your sister here complicates everything. The alliance with your father is already destroyed. If he finds out we're harboring Lila after she ran from an arranged marriage, I know. He could accuse us of kidnapping, sue us, make this into something ugly. I know that too. Tess met his eyes. But she's my sister, and she came here because she had nowhere else to go. I'm not turning her away. Holden was quiet for a long moment. My father is going to lose his mind, probably. But you once told me you wanted to build something different than what your father built. Here's your chance to prove it. They found Vance in his office, reviewing ledgers. He looked up when they entered, immediately suspicious. This looks like trouble. Tess's sister arrived last night, Holden said. She's staying in the East Cottage. Vance set down his pen very carefully. The sister you didn't marry. The one whose father is probably sharpening knives with your name on them. Her father arranged a marriage to Edgar Pemberton, Tess said. She ran away, so she brought her problems to my ranch. Vance stood. Absolutely not. She leaves today." "She stays," Tess said. "You don't make decisions about who stays on this property. I'm making this one." Tess held her ground. Lila has nowhere else to go. Sending her back means sending her into a marriage she doesn't want with a man 3 times her age. Not my problem, not my ranch's problem. Vance looked at Holden. "Tell her." Holden took a breath. "She stays, Father. Tess is right. You're both insane. Silas Whitaker will come here with lawyers, accusations, demands. He'll turn this into a legal nightmare." "Let him try," Tess said. "What's he going to claim? That we kidnapped his adult daughter, who rode here of her own free will? That we're forcing her to stay when she's the one who ran from him? He'll claim you corrupted her, turned her against her family. Good. Maybe more daughters should turn against fathers who sell them like livestock." Vance's face went dark red. "You self-righteous little. This isn't about principles. This is about protecting what we've built here, and harboring a runaway bride puts all of it at risk." "Then we'll handle the risk," Holden said. "Together." "You're choosing her side again." "I'm choosing not to send a terrified woman back to a man who sees her as property." Holden's voice hardened. "You taught me to be strong, Father. You never taught me to be cruel. There's a difference." The words hung in the air like smoke. Vance looked between them, understanding finally settling in his eyes. This wasn't just about Lila. This was about Holden drawing a line his father couldn't cross. "Fine," Vance said finally. "She can stay, temporarily. But when Silas Whitaker shows up demanding his daughter back, and he will, you two are handling it. I want nothing to do with this disaster." He left the office, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Holden let out a long breath. "That went better than expected. He threatened to disown you yesterday. Today he's just angry. That's progress." Tess tried to smile. "Right. I have no idea anymore." The next few days passed in tense waiting. Lila stayed in the cottage, rarely coming out. Tess brought her meals and sat with her, while her sister slowly unraveled years of careful composure. All the training, all the lessons in being the perfect daughter, all of it collapsed when Lila realized it had only made her valuable to men who wanted to own beautiful things. "I don't know how to do anything useful," Lila said one afternoon. "I can play piano and speak French and arrange flowers. What good is any of that? You can learn other things." "Like what?" "Ranch work. I don't have your hands, Tess. I can't even saddle a horse." "Then learn bookkeeping. Learn household management. Learn something that makes you valuable for reasons besides being pretty." Tess said it gently. "You're 23. Your life isn't over. It's just starting in a direction you didn't expect. Lila looked at her with something like envy. You make it sound easy. It's not easy. It's terrifying and hard, and some days I want to quit, but it's mine. That's the difference. On the fourth day, Silas Whitaker arrived. Tess saw the dust cloud from the north ridge where she was working fence with Hank and two other hands. A single rider pushing hard. Even from a distance, she recognized her father's gray gelding. That's trouble, Hank said. Yeah. Tess climbed down from the fence. I need to get back to the house. She made it to the main yard just as her father dismounted. He looked terrible, thinner, grayer, worn down by whiskey and rage. When he saw Tess, his face twisted. Where is she? Hello, father. Tess stayed calm. Nice to see you too. Don't play games with me. Where's Lila? Somewhere safe. She's my daughter. She belongs at home. She's an adult woman who made her own choice to leave. Tess crossed her arms. Same choice I made. Silas Whitaker stepped closer, voice dropping to something dangerous. You've poisoned her against me. Filled her head with your rebellious nonsense. This is your fault. My fault? Tess laughed without humor. I didn't arrange her marriage to a man old enough to be her grandfather. That was all you. Edgar Pemberton is a respectable man who offered good money. There it is. Good money. That's all you see, isn't it? Your daughters aren't people. We're just assets you can sell when you need cash. Her father's hand came up fast. Tess didn't flinch. She had been hit before, years ago, before she learned to stay out of range. But the blow never landed. Holden caught Silas's wrist mid-swing. Touch her, and you leave here with broken bones. Silas yanked his arm free. This is family business. She's my family now. That makes it my business. Holden positioned himself between Tess and her father. You want to talk to Lila? We can arrange that. But you don't get to come on to my property and threaten my wife. She's not your wife yet. Close enough. And my father may tolerate you. I don't have to. For a moment, Tess thought her father might actually swing at Holden. But Silas Whitaker was a bully. Not a fighter. He backed down, redirecting his rage. Lila is coming home today, or I'll have the law on both of you. On what charge? Tess asked. She rode here herself. She's staying of her own free will. What law have we broken? I'll find one. Silas's eyes were desperate now. I'll ruin you. Both of you. I'll tell everyone what you are. A scheming little witch who destroyed her own family. Tell whoever you want, Tess said. I'm done caring what you think. You'll care when no one in this territory does business with the Mercer Ranch because of you. When investors pull out. Father! Lila's voice cut across the yard. She stood near the barn, still wearing the simple dress Rosa had given her, hair pulled back in a practical braid. She looked smaller than Tess remembered, younger, but her voice was steady. Silas spun toward her. Lila, thank goodness. Get your things. We're leaving. No. The word hung in the air. What did you say? I said no. Lila walked closer, each step deliberate. I'm not marrying Edgar Pemberton. I'm not going back to that house. I'm not. Her voice wavered, but held. I'm not for sale anymore. Silas's face went white, then red. You ungrateful. After everything I've done for you. You dressed me up and showed me off and treated me like a prize horse, Lila said. That's not love, Father. That's livestock management. I gave you everything. Education, clothes, opportunities. You gave me training in how to be valuable to rich men. Lila's composure cracked slightly. And now you're upset that I don't want to use that training to save your failing ranch. The ranch is failing because your sister destroyed our alliance with the Mercer family. The ranch is failing because you made bad decisions for years and refused to admit it, Tess said. Stop blaming your daughters for your mistakes. Silas looked between them, understanding finally penetrating his rage. Both daughters standing together, refusing him. His whole strategy collapsed around him. Fine, he said, voice shaking. Keep each other. You're both dead to me. No inheritance, no family, nothing. You want to be independent. Be independent. See how long you last without my name protecting you. Your name has been a weight around my neck since birth, Tess said. I'll manage without it. Silas climbed back on his horse. Before leaving, he looked at Lila one more time. When you come crawling back, and you will, don't expect me to take you in. I'm done with daughters who don't know their place. Good, Lila said quietly. I never want to see you again. He rode off in a cloud of dust and bitterness. Tess watched him go, feeling nothing. No sadness, no anger. Just a kind of empty relief that the final tie had been cut. Beside her, Lila was crying. Silent tears running down her face while her shoulders shook. Tess put an arm around her sister. You did good. I just destroyed my entire life. No, you just started building a new one. Holden approached carefully. Lila, you're welcome to stay as long as you need. We'll figure something out. Lila wiped her eyes. Thank you, both of you. I know this complicates everything. Everything was already complicated, Tess said. This just makes it more interesting. That evening, Vance summoned them all to his office. Tess, Holden, and Lila stood before his desk like students called before a headmaster. Well, Vance said, that was a disaster. It was necessary, Holden said. Silas Whitaker will tell everyone in the territory that we're harboring his runaway daughter. He'll poison every business relationship we have. Investors will hear about family chaos and reconsider their commitments. Vance looked at Tess. This is what happens when you let emotions drive decisions. This is what happens when you stop treating people like property. Tess shot back. Yes, it's messy. Yes, it creates problems. But it's the right thing to do. Right doesn't pay debts. Right doesn't expand operations. Right doesn't build empires. Vance interrupted. Maybe not, Tess said, but it builds something that lasts longer than money. Vance studied her for a long moment. You actually believe that? I do. Then you're naive. He turned to Lila. Can you work, or are you just another mouth to feed? Lila straightened her spine. I can learn. Whatever you need me to do, I'll learn. Bookkeeping, Vance said. We need someone to organize the accounts, track expenses, manage payroll. It's tedious work that requires attention to detail and no physical strength. Think you can handle it? Yes, you'll work with Rosa. She'll teach you the household accounts first, then move you to ranch operations. Vance's expression didn't soften. You make mistakes. You're gone. You cause trouble. You're gone. You prove to be useless. You're gone. Understood. Understood. After Lila left, Vance poured himself a whiskey. You two are going to be the death of this ranch, or its salvation, Holden said. Depends on your perspective. My perspective says we're now enemies of the Whitaker family, harboring a runaway and inviting gossip from every rancher in Montana. Vance took a drink, but I suppose we're committed now. We are, Tess said. Vance looked at her with something that might have been grudging respect. You don't back down, do you? Not when I'm right, and you think you're always right. No, but I know the difference between right and convenient. You taught your son to build an empire. Someone should have taught him when to burn one down instead. Vance almost smiled. Almost. Get out of my office, both of you. Outside. Holden let out a breath he had been holding. I think that's the closest thing to approval you'll ever get from him. He still hates me. Yes, but he's starting to respect you. That's different. The following weeks transformed the ranch in subtle ways. Lila threw herself into bookkeeping with the desperation of someone who needed purpose to survive. She was good at it, meticulous, organized, quick with numbers. Within a couple of weeks, she had identified several accounting errors that had been costing them money. Within a month, she had reorganized the entire system. Your sister has a mind for finance, Vance said grudgingly one evening. Surprising. Only if you assume she was just decorative, Tess said. The meeting with Levi Granger happened on a clear morning as spring deepened. Both families gathered at a neutral property, an abandoned line shack halfway between their ranches. Tess, Holden, and Vance represented the Mercer side. Levi Granger brought his 2 sons and a lawyer. The water dispute had poisoned relations for years, But the cattle incident had shifted something. Both sides were tired of fighting. Both sides needed resolution more than they needed to win. Tess sat quietly while the men discussed technical details of creek access, seasonal flow rates, historical usage patterns. Vance presented the Mercer family's position. Levi countered with Granger claims. The lawyer took notes and suggested compromise language. After a couple of hours of negotiation, they had made almost no progress. The same arguments in circles, the same positions held rigidly. Finally, Tess spoke up. "Can I ask a question?" All eyes turned to her. "What do both families actually need, not want, need, to survive?" Levi frowned. "Access to the creek, especially in summer when other sources dry up." "Same," Vance said. "We can't run our herds without reliable water." "So you both need the creek," Tess said, "but you're fighting over who owns it rather than how to share it. What if ownership doesn't matter? What if you both agree on a usage schedule instead?" "We tried that," Levi said. "It fell apart when someone violated it, and there was no enforcement mechanism." Tess finished. "Right. So build enforcement into the agreement. Third-party arbitration for disputes, penalties for violations, regular meetings to adjust the schedule based on actual conditions rather than fixed dates that don't account for weather variation." The lawyer looked intrigued. "That could work, if both parties agreed to binding arbitration." They negotiated for another few hours, but the conversation had shifted. Instead of fighting over ownership, they were building a system both families could live with. Creek access would rotate based on seasonal needs. Both ranches would fund a shared water monitoring system. Disputes would go to an impartial third party, agreed upon by both families. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. When they finally shook hands on the basic framework, Levi looked at Tess. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Miss Tess. Your father was a fool to let you go." "My father didn't let me do anything," Tess said. "I left." On the ride back, Vance was unusually quiet. Finally, he said, "That was good work today." Tess nearly fell off her horse. "Thank you. Don't let it go to your head. You still have a long way to go before you understand how this business really works." "Of course, sir." But Holden was grinning. Later, when they were alone, he said, "That's the first real compliment I've heard him give anyone in years." "He still thinks I'm unsuitable." "Probably, but he's starting to think you might be useful. That's better." As the seasons changed, bringing green to the brown hills and hope to operations that had survived another brutal winter, the investment deal moved forward, though at a smaller scale than Vance had wanted. The Granger agreement was formalized with lawyers and witnesses. The ranch settled into a rhythm that felt almost stable. Lila continued working with the books, slowly building confidence in her own abilities. She still had moments of panic, waking up terrified that her father would appear and drag her back. But those moments grew fewer as the weeks passed. One evening, Tess found her sister on the cottage porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "You look settled," Tess said. "I look trapped in a different way," Lila corrected, "but it's a better trap, one I chose. That's something." Lila was quiet for a moment. "I owe you an apology for how I acted when you were at home. I knew Father treated you terribly. I saw it every day, and I said nothing, because it benefited me to stay in his good graces." "I know. That's all you're going to say. I know." Tess sat beside her. "What do you want me to say? That I forgive you. I do. That I understand. I do that too. You were surviving the only way you knew how. Same as me. You were braver. I was desperate. That's different from brave." Tess watched the sunset bleed across the sky. "But we're both here now. Both building something new. That's what matters." Inside the main house, lights came on against the gathering dark. Tess could see Holden moving through the rooms, probably looking for her. Vance was still in his office, working late as always. Rosa was preparing dinner, her shadow passing across kitchen windows. The strange, complicated family that Tess had somehow become part of. Not perfect, not even particularly comfortable, but real in ways her old life never was. "Come on," Tess said to Lila. "Dinner's soon, and Rosa hates it when we're late." They walked back to the house together. Two sisters who had been divided by a father's favoritism and reunited by his cruelty. The path between the cottage and the main house was worn smooth by their daily passage. Tess wondered if someday she would look back and see this moment as the beginning of something good. Or maybe she would see it as a beautiful disaster still unfolding. Either way, it was hers. That counted for something. Inside, Holden greeted them with news. "Letter came from the territorial governor's office. They want to meet about expanding rail service west. They specifically requested you be there, Tess." "Me? Why?" "Something about wanting input from ranchers who actually work their land." Holden smiled. "Seems your reputation is spreading." Vance appeared in the doorway of his study. "The governor's office doesn't request meetings. They summon. This is politics, which means it's complicated and dangerous. So we'll be careful," Tess said. "You don't know how to be careful. You know how to charge in and hope things work out." But Vance didn't look entirely displeased. "Still, it's good for the family's reputation. We'll accept." Later that night, Tess lay in bed, listening to the house settle around her. Footsteps in the hall, a door closing somewhere, wind against windows. Normal sounds of normal life, except nothing about her life was normal anymore. Months ago she had been invisible. useful only for the work she could do in the space she could stay out of. Now people requested her presence at meetings, asked her opinion, valued her judgment. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Holden appeared in the doorway. "Can't sleep. Thinking too much." He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. About how strange this all is, how impossible it should be. You choosing me over Lila, your father tolerating my presence, Lila being here, all of it. You think it's temporary, that it'll all fall apart. I think nothing this good lasts without a cost. Tess sat up, and I keep waiting for the bill to come due. Holden took her hand. What if there's no bill? What if this is just life? Messy and complicated, but real. Then I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. He smiled. Guess we'll figure it out together. He kissed her then, gentle and certain, and Tess let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe impossible things could last. Outside, the Montana night stretched vast and dark over land that would test them, break them, rebuild them in ways they couldn't predict. Somewhere in the darkness, Silas Whitaker sat in his dying ranch and nursed his bitterness. Somewhere else, Levi Granger looked at the water agreement and allowed himself to hope. And in the Mercer mansion, two sisters slept under the same roof for the first time in months, both of them free in ways their father had never intended. The future remained uncertain. Danger still lurked in every decision, every choice, every moment of happiness that felt too fragile to trust. But for tonight, Tess was exactly where she had chosen to be, and that was enough. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a rider Tess didn't recognize. Plain envelope, no return address, handed directly to her while she was working in the barn. Someone said to give this to Tess Mercer specifically, the rider said. Nobody else. Tess wiped her hands on her work pants. I'm not Tess Mercer. Not yet, anyway. You're the one who fixed the Granger water dispute. I helped negotiate it, yes. Then you're who I'm looking for. He handed her the envelope and left before she could ask questions. Inside was a single page, handwritten in script she didn't recognize. Miss Whitaker, you don't know me, but I knew your future mother-in-law, Catherine Mercer. I have information about the Mercer Ranch that you need to see. Meet me at the old Parsons place, 3 miles west of town, tomorrow at noon. Come alone. What I have to show you could destroy the Mercer family, or save it. Your choice what you do with the truth. A friend. Tess read it 3 times, her stomach tightening with each pass. This felt like a trap, or blackmail, or some elaborate scheme to pull her away from the ranch and do something terrible. But the mention of Catherine Mercer nagged at her. Holden rarely spoke about his mother, and when he did, his voice carried a grief that hadn't healed. Whatever this person claimed to have, it was connected to her somehow. Tess folded the letter and shoved it in her pocket. She should tell Holden, show him the letter, let him decide what to do. But something stopped her. Some instinct that said this was information she needed to see first before deciding who else should know. The next morning, she told Holden she was riding out to check the western fence line. Not a complete lie. The western fence did need checking, just not at the old Parsons place, and not for the reasons he would assume. "Want company?" Holden asked. "I'll take Hank. You've got that meeting with the lumber supplier." He kissed her forehead. "Be careful. Western Range is rough country. I've survived worse." Tess rode out with Hank for the first couple of miles, then told him she wanted to scout ahead alone. He looked skeptical but didn't argue. Tess was past the point where the ranch hands questioned her judgment. The Parsons place had been abandoned for years, a sagging homestead slowly being reclaimed by the land. Tess approached cautiously, scanning for ambush, for armed men, for anything that screamed danger. Instead, she found an older woman sitting on the porch steps, probably 60 or so, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She stood when Tess dismounted. "Miss Whitaker, thank you for coming. Who are you?" "My name is Helen Marsh. I was Catherine Mercer's closest friend. We grew up together, stayed close until she died." Helen gestured to the steps. "Please sit. This will take some time to explain." Tess stayed standing, hand near the rifle on her saddle. "Explain from there. Smart. Don't trust strangers." Helen didn't seem offended. Catherine died years earlier. Before she passed, she gave me a collection of letters and documents, made me promise to keep them safe until the right person came along to use them properly. And you think I'm that person? I think you're the first person to enter that family who isn't controlled by Vance Mercer, which means you might actually do something with the truth instead of burying it. Tess's hand moved away from the rifle. "What truth?" Helen pulled out a leather satchel and set it on the steps between them. Catherine discovered, about a year before she died, that Vance had built the Mercer Ranch through fraud, forged water rights, manipulated land claims, threatened families into selling at unfair prices. He destroyed people to build his empire, and he did it in ways that were technically legal but morally bankrupt. Tess felt cold despite the spring sunshine. "That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Catherine found evidence, kept copies, wrote it all down. She confronted Vance, but she was already sick by then. Weak. He convinced her to stay silent. Promised he'd make things right after she was gone." Helen's face hardened. "He never did. Instead, he expanded the operation using the same methods. More manipulation, more intimidation, more families crushed under his ambition. Why are you telling me this now? Because Catherine's last letter to me said that if the right person ever came along, someone with integrity who could stand up to Vance, I should give them everything, help them decide what to do with it. Helen pushed the satchel toward Tess. You stopped a range war, negotiated peace between families that hated each other, stood up to your own father when he tried to sell your sister. That's the kind of person Catherine hoped would appear. Tess stared at the satchel like it was a snake. What's in there? Letters Catherine wrote detailing what she found, copies of forged documents, testimonies from people Vance destroyed, evidence of water rights stolen from the Granger family 2 decades earlier, which is why they've been fighting so hard. They're not trying to steal Mercer water. They're trying to get back what was stolen from them. The world tilted sideways. The Granger dispute, the years of legal battles, the bitterness that had poisoned the territory. All of it built on theft Vance Mercer had committed decades earlier. Why didn't Catherine expose this herself? She tried. But she was sick, weak, easy to dismiss as a hysterical woman. And Vance had powerful friends, lawyers, judges, politicians. He convinced everyone Catherine's illness had affected her mind. By the time she died, no one believed her accusations. And you kept quiet for years. Helen's face showed pain. I made a promise to wait for the right person. Catherine knew that exposing this wrong could destroy innocent people, including her son. She wanted someone strong enough to use the truth carefully, not as a weapon. Tess picked up the satchel. Felt the weight of it. Papers, secrets, dynamite wrapped in leather. What do you expect me to do with this? Whatever you think is right. Make it public. Destroy the Mercer family. Force restitution to the families Vance destroyed. Or keep it quiet. Use it as leverage to make Vance change his ways going forward, or burn it all and pretend you never knew. Helen met Tess's eyes. Catherine trusted that the right person would make the right choice. I'm trusting her judgment. Tess rode back to the ranch with the satchel tied to her saddle, her mind racing. Every few minutes, she would convince herself to turn around, give it back, refuse this impossible responsibility. Then she would remember Vance Mercer's cold eyes, his ruthless business tactics, his contempt for anyone who didn't serve his purposes. What if Helen was right? What if the entire Mercer Empire was built on stolen land and broken families? And what the hell was Tess supposed to do about it? She hid the satchel in the cottage where Lila was staying, told her sister not to touch it, and went looking for Holden. She found him in the north pasture, working with Hank to move cattle to fresh grazing. "How was the fence line?" he called. "Fine. Need to replace a few posts." The lie tasted like ash. "Can we talk tonight, after dinner?" Something in her voice made him look closer. Everything all right? I don't know yet. That night, after Vance had retired to his study and Rosa had finished cleaning the kitchen, Tess sat Holden down in their room and told him everything. The letter, the meeting, Helen Marsh, the satchel full of evidence. Holden's face went pale, then red, then pale again. You're saying my father built this ranch through fraud? I'm saying that's what Catherine believed, what she documented before she died. Tess pulled the satchel from where she had hidden it. I haven't read most of it yet. I wanted you to see it first. They spent the next few hours going through the contents, letters in Catherine's careful handwriting, describing what she had discovered. Copies of land documents with obvious forgeries in the signatures. Testimonies from families who had been pressured into selling at unfair prices or losing access to water that was rightfully theirs. A detailed account of how Vance had manipulated the original Granger water agreement, changing terms after it was signed to favor Mercer's interests. By midnight, Holden looked like he had aged 10 years. "This can't be real," he said, but his voice held no conviction. "Do you recognize your mother's handwriting?" "Yes." "Then it's real." Tess sat beside him on the floor, surrounded by evidence of corruption. "The question is, what we do about it. We have to tell my father, confront him, and if he denies it, destroys the evidence, uses his influence to bury it again." Holden's hands were shaking. "This is my legacy. Proof she wasn't crazy, wasn't hysterical. Proof she saw the truth and tried to stop it. I know. If we expose this, we destroy the ranch. Everything my father built, every alliance, every investment, gone. The Mercer name becomes synonymous with fraud. Yes, but if we stay silent, we're complicit. We're letting him continue profiting from what he stole." Holden looked at Tess with desperate eyes. "What would you do?" Tess thought about her father, about the ranch he had destroyed through greed and bad judgment, about the way Silas Whitaker had blamed everyone but himself for his failures, about how corruption left unchecked only grew stronger. "I think we confront your father," she said. "Show him the evidence, demand he make restitution to the families he damaged, force him to rebuild this ranch honestly, or watch it burn. He'll fight us, probably, but he might also be tired of carrying this secret. Your mother's death destroyed something in him. You said so yourself. Maybe part of that destruction was guilt." Holden gathered up the documents with shaking hands. "We do this tomorrow. Together." They barely slept. Tess lay awake, imagining every possible outcome, most of them catastrophic. Vance Mercer was not a man who accepted blame gracefully. This confrontation could end with them thrown off the ranch, disowned, possibly worse. But the alternative was living with the knowledge that everything around them was built on stolen land and broken promises. Morning came too fast. They found Vance in his office, reviewing contracts. He looked up when they entered, immediately sensing trouble. "This looks serious." "It is." Holden set the satchel on the desk. "We need to talk about how you build this ranch." Vance's face went carefully blank. "Excuse me. About the water rights you stole from the Grangers, the land claims you forged, the families you destroyed." Tess's voice was steady. "Your wife knew. She documented everything before she died." For a long moment, Vance didn't move. Then he opened the satchel, pulled out one of Catherine's letters, and read it silently. His hands trembled slightly. "Where did you get this?" "Helen Marsh, Catherine's friend. She's been holding it for years, waiting for the right person to use it." Vance set down the letter carefully. "And you think you're that person?" "I think I'm someone who won't let this continue," Tess said. "The Granger water dispute exists because you stole their rights 2 decades ago. The families you pressured into selling deserve compensation. The people you manipulated deserve truth. You have no idea what you're talking about." But Vance's voice lacked its usual force. "Building something in this territory required hard decisions, difficult choices. Fraud isn't a hard decision," Holden said. "It's theft, and you built our entire legacy on it." Vance stood abruptly. "Your mother was sick when she wrote these, confused. I tried to help her, but she—" "Don't." Holden's voice cracked. "Don't you dare use her illness to dismiss this. She wasn't confused. She saw what you were, and it broke her heart." Vance flinched like he had been struck. "Here's what's going to happen," Tess said, stepping forward. "You're going to make this right. Return the water rights to the Grangers. Compensate the families you destroyed. Renegotiate the land agreements honestly. That would bankrupt us. Then we'll be bankrupt honestly, instead of wealthy through fraud." "You self-righteous little—" Vance caught himself. "You think you understand this business, this territory. I built an empire from nothing. I gave Holden a future. I created something that lasts." "You created something built on other people's suffering," Tess said. "That's not a legacy. That's a curse." Vance looked at his son. "Holden, you can't possibly support this madness." Holden met his father's eyes. "I support honesty, something you should have taught me instead of teaching me how to manipulate and intimidate. I taught you how to survive. You taught me how to become you, and I won't do it." Holden's voice was quiet but final. "We fix this, Father. All of it, or I walk away and take Tess with me, and you can watch your empire collapse alone." The threat hung in the air. Vance had built everything for Holden, to pass on to Holden, to create a dynasty through Holden. Without his son, none of it had meaning. "You'd throw away everything I built in a heartbeat if it's built on lies." Vance sank back into his chair, suddenly looking older than Tess had ever seen him. For a long moment he just stared at the documents spread across his desk, evidence of his crimes written in his dead wife's hand. "She hated me at the end," he said quietly. "Catherine. She looked at me like I was a stranger, like I'd become someone she didn't recognize." "You had," Holden said. "I was trying to build something strong, something that would protect our family, give you opportunities, create security." Vance's voice cracked. "I never meant to become this." Tess felt a flicker of something, almost like sympathy. Almost. "Then stop being this," she said. "Choose differently." "It's too late. The damage is done." "It's never too late to stop doing more damage," Tess said. "You can't undo the past, but you can stop repeating it." Vance was silent for a long time. Outside, the ranch continued its daily operations. Men working, cattle moving, the machinery of empire grinding forward on its foundation of fraud. Finally, Vance spoke. "If I do this, make restitution, return rights, compensate families, we lose half our land, maybe more. The investors will pull out. We'll be reduced to a fraction of what we are. But we'll be honest," Holden said. "Honest and poor. Better than wealthy and corrupt." Vance laughed bitterly. "You sound like your mother." She said the same thing. He pulled Catherine's letter close, reading it again. "She asked me, right before she died, if I was proud of what I'd built, if I could look at our son and honestly say I'd created something worth inheriting." "What did you tell her?" Tess asked. "I told her yes. I told her everything I'd done was for our family." Vance's eyes were wet. "She died believing I was a monster. And maybe she was right." Holden circled the desk and knelt beside his father's chair. "You're not a monster. You're a man who made terrible choices and can still make better ones. It's not too late, Father. It's not. The Grangers will crucify me when they find out the truth." "Maybe," Tess said. "Or maybe they'll respect that you finally admitted it and tried to make amends. Either way, it's better than continuing the lie." Vance looked at Tess with something that might have been respect. "You're the most dangerous person I've ever met. You actually believe people can change." "I've seen it happen. Then you're naive, or I'm right, and you're afraid." Tess held his gaze. "Your wife believed in doing the right thing, even when it cost everything. Honor her by proving she didn't die ashamed of you." That was the blow that landed. Vance closed his eyes, hands clenched on the arms of his chair. When he opened them again, something had shifted. "All right," he said. "We do this, but we do it carefully, strategically. I won't let this ranch be destroyed in the process of fixing my mistakes." "Fair enough," Holden said. The next couple of weeks were brutal. Vance personally contacted Levi Granger and requested a private meeting. Tess and Holden insisted on being present, expecting fury, accusations, possibly violence. Instead, Levi listened as Vance explained the truth, showed him the original documents, the forgeries, the evidence of theft, admitted that the water dispute had never been legitimate, that Granger claims had been valid all along. Levi sat in silence for a long time after Vance finished. "You're telling me I've been right for 2 decades, that my father was right and my grandfather before him?" "Yes," Vance said. "I stole your family's water rights, manipulated documents, paid off officials, and then I used my influence to make you look like the aggressor when you fought back. Why are you telling me this now? Because my wife documented it all before she died. Because my son and his future wife won't let me continue profiting from it. Because I'm tired of being the man Catherine died hating." Levi studied Vance with hard eyes. "You destroyed my family's reputation, cost us legal fees we couldn't afford, made us look like thieves when we were the ones being robbed." "I know. Sorry doesn't fix that." "No, but restitution might." Vance slid a document across. "Full water rights returned to Granger property. Compensation for 2 decades of lost access. A public statement acknowledging my fraud and your family's legitimate claims." Levi read the document carefully. "This is half your water access. Yes, you'll struggle to support your herd. Then we'll reduce the herd, or find other water sources, or figure it out." Vance met Levi's eyes. "This is what I owe you, what my family owes yours. Owes. Why should I believe this isn't another scheme?" Tess spoke up. "Because we're witnesses. Holden and I won't let him back out. If he tries to manipulate this agreement, we'll expose everything publicly. Your family gets justice, or the Mercer family gets destroyed. Those are the only options." Levi looked at her. "You're the one who negotiated our truce." "I am. And now you're forcing your future father-in-law to admit he's a fraud." "I'm forcing him to stop being one. There's a difference." Levi almost smiled. "You married a hell of a woman, Holden." "Don't I know it?" Holden said. The agreement was signed with lawyers present. Levi took the water rights and the compensation, but refused to publicly humiliate Vance. "Your wife already paid the price for your crimes," Levi said. "No point making your son pay again. But if you ever try something like this again, I'll bury you and enjoy doing it." "Understood," Vance said. Word spread through the territory slowly at first, then faster. Vance Mercer had returned water rights to the Grangers, had admitted fault in the decades-old dispute, had reduced his ranch's holdings voluntarily. Some people called it weak. Others called it honorable. Most were just confused. Vance Mercer didn't admit mistakes or give up resources willingly. The investors were less confused and more angry. 2 of them pulled out immediately, citing instability and poor judgment. The others reduced their commitment significantly. The ranch shrank by 1/3 almost overnight. Vance took it with a stoicism that surprised Tess. He didn't rage, didn't blame, just accepted the consequences and started rebuilding with what remained. One evening, Tess found him in his study, staring at Catherine's portrait. "You loved her," Tess said. "More than anything. But I loved power too, and I couldn't figure out how to keep both." Vance didn't look away from the painting. "She asked me once what I was afraid of, what drove me to keep taking and building and dominating. I told her I was afraid of being weak, of losing everything. And now I've lost half of everything, and I feel stronger than I have in years." He finally turned to Tess. "You were right about courage, about change, about all of it, and I hate that you were right. I know, but I'm glad Holden chose you. Catherine would have liked you. You're stubborn enough to match her." It was the closest thing to affection Vance Mercer had ever shown her. Tess accepted it for the gift it was. Lila appeared in the study doorway holding ledgers. "The revised budget is ready. We can maintain current operations with the reduced land, but there's no room for expansion in the next few years." "That's fine," Vance said. "We'll focus on sustainability instead of growth." After Lila left, Vance said, "Your sister is brilliant with numbers, wasted potential, raising her to be decorative." "Most women are wasted potential," Tess said. "We're raised to be decorative or useful, never powerful. And you're trying to change that." "I'm trying to survive it. The change is accidental." Vance almost smiled. "I think you're lying. I think you came into this family specifically to burn down everything I built and rebuild it your way. If I wanted to burn it down, I'd have made those documents public." Tess moved toward the door. "I want to build something that lasts, same as you. I just want it to last for better reasons." She left him alone with Catherine's portrait and the ghost of the man he used to be. Late that night, Tess lay awake beside Holden, both of them too wired to sleep despite exhaustion. "We just dismantled half of my father's empire," Holden said. "We made it honest. That's different, is it? We still destroyed what he built. We destroyed what was built on theft. What remains is actually his." Tess turned to face him. "Your mother tried to do this and failed. We succeeded. That should mean something. It means we're unemployed if the ranch collapses completely. Then we start over. Build something new." Tess took his hand. "I'm not afraid of starting over. I've done it before. I haven't. This ranch is all I've ever known. Then maybe it's time to know something different." Holden pulled her close. "How are you so calm about this?" "I'm not calm. I'm terrified. but I'm also free in a way I've never been before. We did the right thing, even though it cost us. That's worth something. Or it's naive idealism that'll get us killed. Maybe both. They lay in silence, listening to the house settle around them. Somewhere in the darkness, Vance Mercer probably couldn't sleep either, wrestling with demons Tess had forced him to confront. Lila was in her cottage, working on budgets for a four none of them could predict. The ranch hands slept in their bunkhouse, unaware that the empire they worked for had shrunk by half overnight, and Tess felt, for the first time since arriving at the Mercer Ranch, like she might actually belong here. Not because she had adapted to fit their world, but because she had changed their world to fit her values. It was dangerous, presumptuous, possibly doomed to failure. But it was hers, and that made all the difference. As spring turned to summer, and the smaller Mercer Ranch found its rhythm, the reduction in land and resources forced changes nobody had anticipated. Some were painful. 3 ranch hands had to be let go. The seasonal crew was half its normal size. Expansion plans were shelved indefinitely. But other changes felt almost like relief. Without the pressure to constantly grow, to dominate, to crush competition, the daily work became just that. Work. Honest. Difficult. But clean in a way it hadn't been before. Tess noticed it first in Vance. He still worked from dawn until dark. Still drove himself and everyone around him hard, but the desperate edge was gone. He negotiated with neighboring ranchers instead of intimidating them. He solved problems through collaboration rather than domination. One morning, Tess found him at the kitchen table, with Lila going over the books together. Vance was actually listening to her suggestions instead of dismissing them. If we rotate the cattle through the south pasture every 3 weeks instead of monthly, we reduce overgrazing and improve the grass quality, Lila was saying, pointing to numbers in her ledger. It means more labor moving them, but better long-term sustainability. Show me the cost analysis, Vance said. Lila slid across another page covered in her precise calculations. Vance studied it and nodded slowly. Good work. Implement it starting next week. After he left, Lila looked at Tess with something like wonder. He actually listened to me. You're good at this. Even he can see that. I spent years being told my only value was being pretty. Now I'm making decisions about cattle rotation. Lila shook her head. How did this become my life? You chose it, Tess said. Same way I did. That's the difference. The wedding was planned for as summer approached, smaller than Vance had originally wanted, but more meaningful than a spectacle designed to impress investors. Just family, close friends, ranch hands who had become something like family themselves. No fancy dress imported from back east, no orchestra, no performance of wealth and status. Tess wore a simple white dress Rosa had helped her alter from something found in Catherine's old wardrobe. It felt right somehow, wearing something that had belonged to Holden's mother, like Catherine's blessing on a marriage that had started as rebellion and transformed into something genuine. The ceremony took place on the front lawn of the main house under cottonwood trees that had witnessed 30 years of Mercer family history. Levi Granger came, which surprised everyone. He stood in the back with his sons, nodding approval when Holden and Tess exchanged vows. Vance gave Tess away, which felt strange and right in equal measure. This man who had hated her, fought her, finally accepted her, not because she had changed, but because he had. "You're the stubbornest woman I've ever met," Vance said quietly as they walked toward Holden. "My son is either the luckiest man alive or the most cursed." "Probably both," Tess said. "Catherine would have liked you, would have fought me to bring someone like you into this family." He paused at the makeshift altar. "I'm glad she won that fight, even if she's not here to see it." He placed Tess's hand in Holden's and stepped back, eyes wet in a way Tess had never seen before. The vows were traditional: love, honor, partnership. Tess meant every word, but she also knew the real vow was something else entirely. A commitment to keep fighting for honesty, even when convenience tempted. To choose each other, even when choosing each other was difficult. To build something that lasted not because it was powerful, but because it was true. When Holden kissed her, the small crowd erupted in applause. Hank Lowry whistled loud enough to scare birds from the trees. Rosa wiped tears with her apron. Lila smiled with genuine happiness that held no envy, no bitterness, just sisterly joy. And Tess thought just for a moment that maybe impossible things could work out after all. The reception was barbecue and dancing, informal and loud and perfect. Ranch hands mixed with neighbors, old feuds temporarily forgotten in favor of celebration. Even Levi Granger raised a glass to toast the couple. "To Holden and Tess," Levi said. "May they build something better than what came before." "Here's hoping they're smarter than we were," Vance added, and the two former enemies clinked glasses. Later, when the sun was setting and most guests had drifted away, Tess found herself on the porch with Lila. Her sister had changed, no longer the polished perfection their father had demanded, but something more real. Hair pulled back practically, dress chosen for comfort rather than display, hands ink-stained from hours of bookkeeping. "You look happy," Lila said. "I am. Terrified, but happy." "That seems to be your permanent state," Tess laughed. "Fair assessment. She looked at her sister. What about you? You happy? Lila considered the question seriously. I'm free. That's close to the same thing. I get to make my own choices now. Even if all my choices are about ledgers and cattle rotation, it's mine. Nobody can take it away. Father might try. Let him try. I'm not the daughter he remembers. Lila's voice hardened slightly. I spent too long being what he wanted. I'm done with that. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned purple and gold. Inside the house, they could hear Rosa directing cleanup and Vance arguing good-naturedly with Hank about something ranch-related. Normal sounds of normal life. Do you ever regret it? Lila asked quietly. Choosing Holden, leaving everything behind. Tess thought about the question. About the girl she had been months ago. Invisible. Useful only for the work she could do. Convinced she would never be more than her father's unpaid ranch hand. About the terror of riding away into darkness with a man she barely knew. About every difficult moment since then. Every fight with Vance. Every risk that could have destroyed everything. No, Tess said. Not even once. Even on the worst days, when everything's falling apart, and I'm convinced we've made a terrible mistake, I still chose this. And that choice matters more than whether it's easy. You're braver than me. I'm more desperate than you. There's a difference. Tess squeezed her sister's hand. But you're here now. You made your own choice, too. That took courage. Holden appeared in the doorway. Wife, are you planning to spend our wedding night talking to your sister, or can I steal you away? Tess stood smiling. Depends. Where are you stealing me to? Somewhere without family, ranch hands, or responsibility. Just for tonight. He had prepared a campsite up on the ridge overlooking the valley, away from the house and the noise and the constant demands of ranch life. Just a tent, blankets, a small fire, and the vast Montana sky spreading out above them like eternity. They lay together watching stars appear one by one, not talking much, just existing in the same space, without pressure to be anything other than themselves. I never thought I'd get here, Holden said finally. Married to someone I actually want to spend my life with. Running a ranch that's honest instead of powerful. Having a relationship with my father that isn't just fear and obligation. You could have had all that with Lila, Tess said. Well, maybe not the honest ranch part, but the marriage, the family approval. No. Lila would have been exactly what my father wanted, which means eventually I would have become exactly what he was, ruthless, isolated, married to someone who feared me instead of challenged me. He turned to look at her. You make me better. You make me want to be better. That's worth every difficult moment. even when I force you to dismantle half your inheritance. Especially then, they made love slowly, carefully, learning each other in ways their chaotic courtship hadn't allowed. And afterward, lying tangled together under stars that had witnessed centuries of human struggle, Tess felt something settle in her chest. Not peace exactly. Life on a ranch never promised peace, but a kind of rightness, a sense that she was finally where she belonged. Summer progressed with the relentless heat that defined Montana's high season. The reduced herd thrived on better-managed grazing. The water-sharing agreement with the Grangers worked better than anyone expected. Lila's organizational systems transformed the ranch's operations from chaotic to streamlined. And slowly, grudgingly, Vance Mercer transformed from an empire builder into something almost like a partner. He still made unilateral decisions sometimes, still fell back on old habits of intimidation and control. But Tess and Holden had learned how to push back, and increasingly Vance listened, instead of steamrolling. One afternoon, as summer deepened, Tess was working in the barn when a rider approached. Not someone she recognized. A young man, maybe 20, wearing a suit that looked uncomfortable in the heat. "I'm looking for Tess Mercer. That's me. I'm a clerk from the Territorial Land Office. We've received a filing from Silas Whitaker claiming you and your sister stole property from him when you left his ranch. Horses, tack, personal items. He's demanding either their return or compensation." Tess felt ice in her stomach despite the heat. What kind of property? The clerk consulted his notes. 2 horses, a bay mare named Rosie, and a gray gelding. Saddles, riding equipment, and various household items. Total value claimed at $800. Rosie was my horse. I raised her from a foal. The tack was mine, bought with money I earned. Do you have documentation of purchase? Tess stared at him. I'm a ranch hand. I worked for my father without pay my entire life. I didn't get receipts for the horse I raised, or the equipment I needed to do unpaid labor. Then legally anything on his property belongs to him. You'd need to prove ownership or pay compensation. The clerk looked uncomfortable. I'm required to inform you that failure to respond could result in legal action. After he left, Tess stood in the barn feeling rage build in her chest. Her father couldn't control her anymore, couldn't sell her, couldn't dictate her life. So now he had found another way to hurt her. Through the law, through claims of theft, through anything that might drag her back into his sphere of influence. She found Holden in the north pasture and explained the situation. His face darkened. He's doing this to force contact, to make you acknowledge him. I know. We'll pay it. $800 to make him go away. That's not the point. Tess's hands clenched. "Rosie is mine. She was given to me when I was 15 years old. I've cared for her, trained her, worked her for years. She's mine, and he knows it. Can you prove it? To a judge? Probably not. I was his daughter, living on his property. Legally, everything there belonged to him." Tess felt tears of frustration. He's doing this because I'm finally happy. Because I built something without him. Because I got away. Holden pulled her close. Then we pay the $800, and we never think about him again. We don't let him have power over you anymore. But Tess couldn't let it go. That night, she sat in the kitchen with Lila, both of them staring at the legal notice. "He took your horse," Lila said quietly. "After everything else, he took your horse. And he'll keep taking until there's nothing left to take. That's who he is. We could fight it, hire a lawyer, drag it through court. With what money? With what time? He wants me distracted, fighting, pulled back into his world, even if it's just through legal battles." Tess crumpled the notice. "He wins either way. We pay him or we fight him, and both options give him exactly what he wants. Acknowledgement that he still matters. So what do we do?" Tess thought about it for a long time. Then she stood. "I'm going to see him one last time. End this face-to-face instead of through lawyers and land office clerks." "Tess, that's exactly what he wants." "I know, but he's going to get it on my terms, not his." Holden tried to talk her out of it. Vance actually ordered her not to go. But Tess saddled a horse the next morning and rode toward the Whitaker ranch alone, carrying nothing but determination and a small bag. The property looked worse than she remembered. Fences sagging, buildings in disrepair, cattle thin and scattered across overgrazed pasture. Silas Whitaker had destroyed what remained after Tess and Lila left, drinking and raging instead of working. She found him on the porch, bottle in hand, looking 10 years older than the last time she had seen him. "So you came," he said, words slightly slurred. "Knew you would eventually." "I came to end this." Tess dismounted, not to beg, not to apologize, not to let you drag me back into your bitterness. To end it. "You took my property. I took a horse you gave me years ago, and equipment I earned through a decade of unpaid labor. You want to call that theft? Fine. Here." She threw the bag at his feet. $800. Every cent Holden and I had saved for winter supplies. Take it and leave me alone. Silas looked at the money, then at Tess. "You think this is about money? I think this is about control, about punishing me for choosing my own life instead of the one you planned, about making sure I never forget that you still have power to hurt me. You destroyed this family. You destroyed this family." Tess interrupted. You treated your daughters like assets instead of people. You sold Lila to the highest bidder and worked me like unpaid labor. You drove both of us away through your own cruelty. And now you're sitting here drinking yourself to death because you can't admit that you're the problem. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing. Not love, not respect, not even basic human decency. And I'm done letting you pretend otherwise. Tess's voice was steady, final. Take the money. Keep the horse if that makes you feel powerful. But this is the last time we speak. The last time I acknowledge you exist. After today, you're dead to me. Silas stood unsteadily. You can't just walk away. Watch me. Tess climbed back on her horse. I've built a life without you. A family that actually values me. A future that doesn't include your bitterness, poisoning everything good. You can drink yourself to death in this falling apart ranch, and I won't care, because you stopped being my father the moment you started treating me like property. Tess, no, you don't get to say my name anymore. You don't get to claim any connection to who I've become. I'm not your daughter. I'm not your property. I'm not your anything. She looked down at him from horseback. This man who had controlled her entire childhood and adolescence and felt absolutely nothing. Goodbye, father. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for at the bottom of that bottle. She rode away without looking back. Behind her, Silas Whitaker stood on his porch, holding $800 that wouldn't save his ranch or his soul, watching his daughter disappear for the final time. Tess cried on the ride back, not from sadness, but from relief. From the physical release of cutting the last tie to a man who had never deserved her loyalty. From the freedom of finally, completely being done. When she arrived back at the Mercer Ranch, Holden was waiting in the yard. How did it go? It's over. Tess dismounted and let him catch her when her legs felt unsteady. I gave him the money, told him to leave us alone, and cut him off completely. He's dead to me now. Actually dead. Not just legally. Are you okay? I'm free, and saying it out loud made it real. I'm completely, finally, free. Fall came to Montana in a rush of gold and crimson, the landscape transforming overnight from summer green to autumn fire. The ranch prepared for winter with a confidence born of honest sustainability. Cattle were rotated to final grazing. Supplies were stocked. Repairs were completed, and Tess stood on the ridge overlooking the valley, pregnant and trying to catch her breath after the climb. Holden found her there, wind whipping her hair around a face that had gained softness and strength in equal measure. You're supposed to be resting. I've been resting all morning. I needed air. Tess looked out over the land spread out below. Reduced holdings, honest boundaries, property that was actually theirs instead of stolen. It's beautiful up here. It is. Holden wrapped his arms around her from behind, hands settling on the swell of her stomach. You think our daughter will love it like you do. Daughter, you're assuming. Mother's intuition. Tess laughed. You don't have a mother. I have you. Close enough. He was quiet for a moment. What should we tell her about how all this started? The truth. That her grandfather built an empire on fraud, and her grandmother died trying to stop him. That her parents chose honesty, even when it cost everything. That her Aunt Lila learned strength by losing security. Tess leaned back against him, and that love, real love, the kind worth having, starts with choosing each other even when it makes no sense. That's a heavy story for a child. She's a Mercer. She'll be strong enough to carry it. They stood together on the ridge as the Sioux climbed toward noon. Two people who had been invisible and desperate and broken, finding something like peace in the ruins of empire. Below them, the ranch continued its work. Hank Lowry directed cattle movement with efficiency. Born of decades of experience, Rosa prepared the noon meal for hands who had become family. Lila sat in the ranch office, managing books with precision their father had never valued until it was almost too late. Vance moved between buildings, still driven, still demanding, but channeling that intensity toward sustainability instead of domination. And everywhere, in every corner of the smaller, honest operation, Catherine Mercer's legacy lived. Not in the empire Vance had tried to build, but in the integrity her letters had demanded, in the honesty her death had required, in the second chance she had left hidden for years, waiting for someone brave enough to use it. Do you think she's watching? Holden asked, following Tess's gaze down to the ranch. My mother? I think she left us everything we needed to fool what she couldn't. That's better than watching. Winter came hard that year, but the ranch was ready. Smaller herds meant adequate hay. Honest water rights meant no disputes when ice-locked creeks. Reduced debt meant breathing room when unexpected problems arose. Tess gave birth on a bitterly cold winter morning, bringing a daughter into the world with her mother's gray eyes and her father's determination. They named her Catherine, which made Vance cry for the first time Tess had ever witnessed. She would have loved this, he said, holding his granddaughter with shaking hands. Loved you. Loved all of it. Then live like she's watching, Tess said. That's how we honor her. Spring returned as it always did, bringing green to frozen ground, and hope to operations that had survived another brutal winter. Tess walked the fence lines with Catherine strapped to her chest, teaching her daughter the land the way Tess's father had never bothered to teach her. "This is where the Mercer property meets Granger land," Tess told the baby, who couldn't possibly understand. "Your grandfather stole it once, then gave it back. That took more courage than taking it ever did." Lila had started courting one of the ranch hands, a quiet man named Ben, who loved numbers almost as much as she did. They spent evenings reviewing ledgers together, which sounded boring, but apparently worked for them. "You're happy," Tess said one afternoon, watching her sister laugh at something Ben had said. "I'm building something that's better than happy." Lila looked at Tess. "You taught me that. Choosing your own life instead of accepting what you're given. I didn't teach you anything. You learned it yourself. Maybe, but you showed me it was possible." Lila squeezed her hand. "Thank you for not leaving me behind." The ranch found its rhythm over the following years. Not explosive growth, not empire building, just steady, sustainable operations that supported the families who depended on it. Vance never fully lost his edge. Some men were shaped too deeply by ambition to completely change, but he learned to channel it differently, to build partnerships instead of crushing competition, to value integrity alongside profit. He taught Catherine to ride when she was young, patient in ways he had never been with Holden. Maybe because he had learned, finally, that some legacies were worth more than land and cattle. That being remembered with love mattered more than being remembered with fear. One afternoon, as their daughter grew, Tess stood in the same spot where Holden had first chosen her. On that hillside overlooking the ranch that had seemed so foreign and intimidating. Now it felt like home. Messy, complicated, built on honest mistakes instead of successful fraud. "Happy?" Holden asked, appearing beside her, with their daughter on his shoulders. Tess thought about the question, about the girl she had been months ago, invisible, useful only for work, convinced she would never matter to anyone. About the terror of choosing the unknown over the familiar. About every difficult moment since, every fight, every risk, every decision that could have destroyed everything. "I'm exactly where I chose to be," Tess said, and it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Years later, when Catherine was old enough to understand, Tess would tell her daughter the whole story about the grandfather who built an empire on theft and the grandmother who died trying to stop him, about the aunt who learned her own strength by losing everything safe, about the great-grandfather who had sold daughters like cattle and paid the price in loneliness. But mostly, Tess would tell her daughter about choice, about the terrifying, liberating power of choosing your own life, even when it makes no sense to anyone else. Because that was the real legacy Catherine Mercer had left. Not letters exposing fraud, not evidence of corruption, but proof that one person's courage could churn everything, that speaking truth mattered, that integrity survived even when the people who embodied it didn't. Tess had inherited that legacy, not through blood, but through action. Through refusing to stay invisible, through demanding honesty, even when convenient lies would have been easier, through choosing love that required effort over comfort that required submission. And now she would pass it to her daughter, not as burden, but as possibility, not as expectation, but as example. The ranch spread out below them, in all its imperfect glory, smaller than Vance had dreamed, more honest than he had ever planned. Sustainable in ways Empire never could be. Cattle grazed on fairly accessed water. Fences marked honestly negotiated boundaries. Workers received fair wages for genuine labor. It wasn't perfect. Some days were brutal. Some years lost money. Some decisions backfired spectacularly, but it was theirs, built on truth instead of theft, maintained through partnership instead of domination, passed down through generations who would know how it was earned and what it cost. That was worth everything. Tess took her daughter's hand, felt Holden's arm around her shoulders, and looked out over land that had witnessed fraud, redemption, and transformation. "Tell me the story again," Catherine said, as children always do. "About how you and Papa met." Tess smiled. "Well, it started with an impossible choice." And she told the story one more time, because some stories deserve endless repetition. Stories about people who were invisible finding themselves seen. About empires built on and crumbling to make room for something solid. About daughters who refused to be property and carved out their own definitions of worth. Stories about choosing the terrifying unknown over the familiar prison. Stories about love that starts with respect and builds toward partnership. Stories about legacy that matters more than wealth. The sun set over the Montana territory, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always new challenges. But tonight, Tess stood with her family on land they had fought to make honest, and felt the particular satisfaction that comes from building something that lasts for the right reasons, not because it was perfect, but because it was true. And truth, Tess had learned, was the only foundation strong enough to support real love, real family, real life, Everything else was just performance, and she was done performing.